Chapter 76, Ambush in the Night, 2. Mikami sighed as she faced that person. Tsukimi, I didn't expect you to come. Tsukimi looked at her silently as Mikami continued. Why are you trying to kill me? Because you will get in the way of the plan. Plan? You mean the plan to reveal the other world to reality? Tsukimi nodded and Mikami clenched her fists. Why? Why is that necessary? Tsukimi raised her hand. Because that will allow the creation of the true empire. Mikami realized that Tsukimi had made her decision, and like before, there was no way to change her mind. If that's the case, I will have to stop you. I knew you would. Tsukimi began to unleash her energy and Mikami glanced around. They have one more. We have one more too. Bihung smiled and looked at his opponent. She's the god of rain. Ameno, you don't stand a chance. Bihung laughed. Don't think I am still the old me. He then took out the iron fan. Mikami grinned. Where did you get that from? I was lucky. Bihung fanned himself. We'll see how it goes. Ameno was a difficult opponent, but he had the iron fan which could control wind, giving him a fighting chance. Yet, Bihung couldn't tear his eyes away from Tsukimi. He could sense her terrifying demonic energy. It seemed like he would have to help Mikami as fast as he could. Hurry up and get over here, Wujin. The bamboo spear was nicked after clashing with Gram. The durability of a Dragon Slayer's sword was amazing. However, Wujin's surprise didn't match Paura's shock. What kind of avatar are you? It was a strength that he had not expected in the slightest. The speed didn't fall behind his either. He was within the top 10 in terms of strength, yet his opponent's strength was almost the same as his. Paura's smiled as his sword mercilessly attacked Wujin, who tried to deflect it, but Paura's was too fast and powerful. Wujin grimaced and moved quickly. Fortunately, he was a bit quicker than Paura's. In response, Paura's swung Gram with a wide angle to push Wujin back and unleashed his spiritual power. Wujin also focused his power to change the shape of Cloak of Vampire Bat. He felt his cloak wrapped around him, surging with power, and charged forward. He attacked the enemy and Paura's brought his sword up to push away. Wujin repeated the attack and Paura's stepped in. That's when Wujin stopped. Paura's lunged in to thrust his sword and Wujin also charged in. Paura's scoffed, thinking Wujin was now too close to attack him with a long spear, and thus he aimed his sword at Wujin's heart. Wujin then twisted his body slightly right when the sword touched his chest. The strengthened skin was cut and blood gushed out, but Wujin was able to place his right hand on Paura's left stomach. Paura's swung his left fist, but Wujin was faster at summoning Guybulg from his hand. Guybulg pierced through Paura's and spread out inside his body the moment it stabbed through. Paura's felt severe pain and couldn't attack further. Wujin then jumped back. He sighed as his wound wasn't healing. It seemed like the power of the Dragon Slayer's sword was stopping his dragon blood from regenerating. Wujin then saw Paura's not standing straight with Guybulg in his stomach. Where did that come out from? Paura's did expect Wujin to have Guybulg, but he thought Wujin didn't have it after seeing that he was only fighting with a bamboo spear. But to think Guybulg could appear from the hand, Paura's gritted his teeth. Guybulg's spear chomped opponents whenever it attacked. It wasn't possible to easily pull it out. Paura's grabbed Guybulg and pulled it out. Blood gushed out and he charged at Wujin anyway. Wujin then threw his spear and Paura's used his Gram to deflect it. Wujin then summoned another spear and deflected Gram again. Paura's threw Gram back up and Wujin dashed back to get away from the sword. Paura's thought he had won as there was no way for Wujin to avoid being attacked in that stance. Yet Wujin was smiling, and before Paura's could think of the reason, something flew forward and penetrated his back. Guybulg pierced through his heart. Ugh! Blood gushed out from his mouth and Wujin thrust his other spear into Paura's mouth. He was killed instantly. Wujin then retrieved the spears and fed the spirit stone to his fang and wrapped his shoulders with the cloak. He then heard explosions coming from Mikami's room. Wujin also picked up the Gram and jumped up. He had to go to Mikami as fast as possible. After plowing through 5 ceilings, he felt vicious energy from above. Wujin then got up and looked around. They were fighting 3 on 3. Bihung was fighting against a water-type enemy and Shinatsu was fighting a god of lightning. They seemed equal to be in power, but Mikami was different. She was losing. Tsukimi, sister of Mikami, and the god of the moon. There's a full moon today. Wujin unwrapped the cloak and Paara's dried up body fell to the ground. Then, Wujin put it back on his body. It seemed like the cloak was moving more smoothly now after drinking Paara's blood. He had gotten much stronger after killing Paara's. Wujin took out the spear and the mirror of heavens. He couldn't use the mirror in the previous battle since Paara's didn't give him time to pull it out, but he now had time to use it. Wujin used his increased spiritual power and flashed the light at Tsukami. She turned to Wujin. He thought this would give them a chance at victory, but it seemed like Tsukami was unaffected. She pointed toward Wujin and he jumped back instinctively. The area around him was devoured by the demonic energy that filled the area. Wujin put the mirror back into his pocket. These gods were all natural beings. They weren't unholy for the mirror to work on them. Wujin then jumped again as the energy attacked again. It looked like Tsukami was not letting her guard down against Wujin although she was fighting a Mikami. Wujin threw his spear at Tsukami. His powerful muscle strength allowed the spear to shoot past the interference of demonic energy. Tsukami seemed to be surprised that it did, but she easily snatched the spear in the air. She then transferred the energy into the spear and threw it back. Wujin ran up to receive the spear. Rampant demonic energy grasped his arm, but his cloak hid it away this time. At least this would allow him to fight. Tsukami was astonished. Wujin smiled and jumped. He grabbed Gram and he felt like he could swing it at her to cut her down, but he felt something coming down toward him. So he hopped back. A man with long hair jumped down with a long sword where Wujin had been. Wujin recognized the man. Susanoo? Chapter 77. Susanoo. 1. Susanoo's appearance was unexpected. They knew he was coming, but to see him siding with Tsukami, that was the worst case scenario. A Mikami shouted with a frown. What are you doing here? Susanoo looked around with his sword. His appearance shocked everyone so much that all sides paused fighting. Susanoo then turned to Tsukami. You're late. Susanoo nodded and a Mikami gritted her teeth. Why have you two betrayed me? She shouted sadly, but Susanoo brought his sword up. Wujin got up and looked at him. What Susanoo had was the weapon he obtained after killing Orochimaru. The weapon named Kusanagi no Ken. It was one of the 3 divine objects of Japan. It wasn't going to be easy to fight Susanoo. Bihung shouted at Wujin. You take care of him. That was easy to say. Wujin grabbed Gram and got up. Kusanagi no Ken was a powerful sword, but Gran was also a legendary sword. Wujin turned to Susanoo, but he swung his sword at Wujin without any hesitation. A powerful wave of spiritual energy flew at him. Wujin then smashed it down with Gram. The wave was divided into 2 and traveled behind him, destroying the wall. Susanoo then turned to Wujin for the first time. Name? Wujin felt a chill as Susanoo was focused at him. If Sun Wukong was the most powerful avatar in China, then Susanoo was the most powerful avatar in Japan. Sun Wukong seemed to be much stronger, but Susanoo wasn't that far off. Wujin brought up his Gram and replied, Wujin, and then Susanoo disappeared. Damn it. Wujin brought his sword back to defend against the attack, but he was thrown into the air. Susanoo then continued attacking Wujin, thinking he had no way of landing after being in midair. Yet the cloak turned to a wing and pulled Wujin up. Susanoo's spiritual power was too strong. Susanoo scoffed. Interesting. He then jumped up toward Wujin like a cannonball, and in response, Wujin pulled back. Susanoo swung his sword and the wave of spiritual energy swept above Wujin's head. The power was too much for Wujin to cut, nor could he avoid it. He had to wrap himself with the cloak like a ball. To him, it felt like a truck had rammed into him as he slammed into the floor. He was sent 5 stories down into the parking lot, and Susanoo followed him, cracking a smile as he saw Wujin swinging his Gram. The sword didn't have any spiritual power, but he was able to counter Susanoo's attack. Wujin was struck away, but he got up from the ground anyway. He looked down and smiled. The attack was powerful, but his defenses were enough to allow him to endure it. Wujin looked at Susanoo, who got down on the ground. Wujin required the wing from the cloak to fly, but Susanoo seemed like he could fly just by using his mighty spiritual power. You endured it, Wujin answered. If that's all you can do, I can much more than that. Susanoo smiled and swung his sword horizontally. The spiritual power threw all the cars away, and Wujin brought up Gram. Wujin sliced on the wave to open a way. Although the wave had been cut, it still gave him the same amount of shock as if a gun had fired at him. But that didn't stop Woojin. He dashed towards Susanoo. It seemed like Susanoo was starting to become annoyed. He swung his sword again while Woojin brought his spear back and threw it. Woojin was thrown back helplessly, but the spear pierced through the entire wave, and Susanoo struck it down with his sword and looked at it. He was interested in the spear that had pierced through his waves. That's when gunfire was heard and a bullet flew at Susanoo. Yet it soon slowed down and dropped. The spiritual power around Susanoo was enough to make bullets to fall even before arriving at its target. Susanoo turned and swung his sword at the direction. Part of the ryokan was destroyed, but Mayo had already pulled herself out and was behind Woojin. "Why are you here?" "I'm done with the Ana." "You shouldn't be here." Mayo smiled. "Doesn't it feel nice to see me here though?" Woojin laughed. "Do you need to flirt even at such a moment?" "What are you talking about?" Woojin laughed and gave Gram to Mayo. "Grab this and back up." "What is this?" "Gram, it's a divine object." "You're not giving to me, are you?" "This is too big for me." "Stop joking and move back." "Okay." Mayo then moved back and Susanoo decided that Mayo didn't pose any threats, but Woojin was different. The bamboo spear was especially dangerous since it pierced through his armor that was made from spiritual power. Susanoo decided to go all out. He increased the energy surrounding him. Woojin then took the cocktail demon. He had finished all the preparations he could make, but his dragon blood should have suppressed the cocktail, but he didn't have any dragon blood now. His eyes turned red and Susanoo scoffed. "You smell of filth." Woojin was already charging in. Then anger and hatred from within had been awakened. Susanoo was not interested in an unconscious enemy. He ran in with a much faster speed than before, yet Woojin reacted to it instinctively. He thrust his spear into Susanoo's chest and Susanoo laughed, speeding up a bit more. The spear missed and hit nothing but air while the sword reached Woojin's side. It barely made a cut and Susanoo frowned. The attack was too light. Susanoo then charged in further to push the attack, but Woojin dodged it instinctively. He still received wounds, but he was moving faster than his normal maximum speed. Susanoo was astonished. It seemed like the enemy's physical stats had outpowered their small spiritual power to move at such a speed. He had never seen an avatar that was this fast and strong. Susanoo thought he made a good choice to come, and he decided to end it soon. "Let's finish this." It was only a slight difference in power, but if one couldn't overcome their limits, then there was no way to win. Susanoo thrust his sword and Woojin twisted his body so that his lung was penetrated instead. The sword got stuck, and when Susanoo tried to pull it back, Woojin swung his left fist, and the fist had a large amount of spiritual power stacked on it to look like a giant's fist. There was no way to escape. Damn. Chapter 78, Susanoo 2, Strike of the Giant. This attack had to be timed precisely as Woojin could not yet control this skill yet. Its power was unmatched, but it required all of his spiritual power. However, without his instincts, Woojin couldn't think of such a thing. He couldn't lose his chance, and he just unleashed the best attack he could think of. Susanoo had to take the attack and hope that his spiritual power armor would withstand it. However, he was a bit confident in doing so. The spiritual power from the glove of Bangu was too powerful. It destroyed his armor and crushed him. Ugh! As he was thrown away, he pulled the sword with him. It had been a long time since his armor shattered and he was wounded. But he couldn't lose. Blood gushed out of the wound and Woojin didn't care. He was already bound by anger and hatred like a warrior in berserk mode, and he threw the spear at Susanoo's heart. Susanoo quickly brought up his sword to defend, but he couldn't deflect it fully and his left side was hit. Susanoo got up and pulled out the spear. Blood began pouring out, but he couldn't focus on that yet. Woojin was charging in again without any spiritual power. However, he wasn't much without any spiritual power now. Susanoo laughed. He didn't expect to be dragged into such a dogfight. He had gotten into such a fight only when he fought Yamata no Orochi in the past. Susanoo swung his fist at Woojin and Woojin landed a fist on Susanoo's face. He then grabbed Susanoo's arm and twisted it. Woojin's sheer strength was able to twist Susanoo's arm that was protected by spiritual power. Susanoo pulled his arm back and injured Woojin's face. Woojin's face became bloody, but he rammed his head at Susanoo too. They began to fight like savages, but without any spiritual power. There was no way for Woojin to win against Susanoo. Susanoo threw him down and stepped on him to pin him down. He looked at his wound but the blood did not stop. He then grabbed his sword to cut the wound out and he focused on recovering. The bleeding stopped but it was only a temporary fix. That is a terrible spear. He never heard of such a spear. Susanoo then kicked Woojin's chin to knock him out and looked up. There was still a fierce battle going on. Susanoo looked down and realized the stench was disappearing from Woojin. He felt his nose bleeding and wiped it off. It had been a long time since he fought so fiercely, but he had come on top. He then brought up his sword and pressed it down on Woojin's heart. Woojin's skin turned hard but it soon was pierced, along with the heart. Susanoo then jumped up to the top floor. After Susanoo disappeared, Mayo came out of hiding and ran toward Woojin. The cloak of vampire bat was sucking his wound, drinking his blood. Fortunately, it was going to stop the heavy bleeding, but he was going to die soon. "Wake up!" Mayo tried to wake him up while pulling the cloak from the chest, but he didn't wake up. He was already half dead. Mayo then brought up her orb and placed it in her mouth before she kissed him. Woojin's mouth was open and the orb went in. The orb then came back out from Woojin's mouth and returned to Mayo. The size began to grow smaller and tears welled up in Mayo's eyes. "I worked so hard for this." Mayo then slapped Woojin's chest. "Ugh!" Woojin woke up and Mayo took a step back. Woojin then touched his lips and glanced at the orb. "You saved me?" "Yeah, I saved you." Woojin knew how important the orb was to Mayo. It was a must for her to become a Gmeo, but she used it to save him. He was thankful. Woojin then remembered the process required for using the orb and blushed. Mayo also blushed. Woojin got up and checked his chest. If Mayo had come a bit late, he might have died. "How long was I out?" 3 minutes. If Susanoo joined the others, 3 minutes was enough to change the outcome. Woojin tried to get up but he felt dizzy. Damn it. He focused on his wound and the cloak of vampire bat slowly left the wound. Woojin let out a hollow laugh, realizing that his cloak would eat him if he were killed. At least the wound was healing. Woojin got up while feeling extreme pain. "You just came back from death. Don't move." "I have to go." Woojin retrieved the spears to change them back into bracelets and he grabbed Gram while looking toward the top floor of the ryokan. Based on the powerful demonic energy storm from above, it seemed like a Mikami was still alive. Woojin turned to Mayo. "Stay here. It's too early for you." "The same goes for you too." Woojin just laughed and jumped. When he got up, a Mikami was in a corner, drenched in blood. Bahyung and Shinatsu didn't look good either. It was all due to the fact that Woojin had lost to Susanoo. Woojin's reappearance shocked Susanoo. "You came back from death?" Woojin let out a breath and swung his gram. He used the cocktail to fight earlier, but he lost control and almost died. He had lost all his spiritual power also and was in no condition to fight. But he couldn't let everyone die. Susanoo swung his sword lightly. He was wounded but his spiritual power was still intact. Woojin then stopped breathing as the wave of spiritual power unleashed at him. Even with Gram, he had no way to cut that now. He then jumped at an angle and stepped on the wall to drop in front of a Mikami. He flicked his finger and Bahyung swung the iron fan. The storm pushed their enemies away and Bahyung and Shinatsu also gathered up. Bahyung asked, "Are you okay, number?" "I almost died." If Mayo did not help, he definitely would have died. Woojin thanked Mayo in his mind and asked, "A Mikami, do you have a plan?" "Not unless we see sunlight." "Then we should run." "Run? We can't defeat them, but we can run, right?" Woojin whispered. The enemies were readying themselves also. Woojin told Bahyung, "Hand over the iron fan." "For what?" "Give it to Shinatsu for a second." If Shinatsu, the god of wind, used the iron fan, it would bring out a different result. Bahyung looked unwilling but he gave the fan to Shinatsu anyway. Shinatsu grabbed the fan and looked down at it with a weird expression. "This is crazy." He then looked up and asked, "Why didn't you give it to me earlier?" With that, Shinatsu swung the fan and unleashed unimaginable destruction. Susanoo swung his word and Tsukahime controlled the demonic energy but it only allowed them to barely save themselves. They couldn't help being blown away. Bahyung laughed. The difference was like night and day compared to when he used it. "I'll take the rear." Bahyung then glared at Shinatsu. "If you lose that, I'll kill you." Shinatsu swung his fan again instead of answering Bihung. The next attack threw the opponent's back also. The fan did not allow Shinatsu to deliver a decisive blow, but it was easy for him to blow them away. Wujin helped Mikami and Mayo appeared with Ryota. "Let's go." Wujin jumped while Mayo and Bihung followed behind. Shinatsu then swung his fan to help speed them up. As they ran, Wujin heard Suzunu's voice coming from behind. "Move out of my way." A merciless wave of spiritual power swept toward Shinatsu. He tried swinging the fan but he knew it wouldn't be able to handle Suzunu's attack. Shinatsu swung his fan to help him jump up instead but Takumi threw down a bolt of lightning, penetrating Shinatsu's shoulder. Therefore, Bihung helped Shinatsu jump up. Tsukaimi also came to attack but Bihung shouted, "Run!" They rode the wind made by the fan to jump and Tsukaimi's demonic energy destroyed the entire Ryokan. Tsukaimi then left the destroyed Ryokan to chase after her enemy. Suzuno sighed and followed her along with Takumi and Ameno. The moon was going down in the west. Chapter 79, Sunrise, 1. While running, Wujin turned to Mayo after glancing back at his chasers. "Mayo, we should split up and hide. Get away with Ryota." "It's okay. Isn't it more dangerous to be separate? They are only here for a Mikami and Shinatsu. It's best for you to get away safely." Bihung also nodded. "Don't be a fool and get away from us, Bihung. You are dragging us behind. Run." Bihung then looked at Shinatsu. "Buy us some time. I'm a patient. Remember?" Shinatsu quickly swung his iron fan. As the giant gust of wind blew enemies to the back, Mayo hid her trace and sped off. Ryota also shape-shifted himself. They disappeared. Wujin then said, "A Mikami, we can't run for hours." They were too quick to follow. Shinatsu was keeping them at bay but his spiritual power wasn't infinite either. Not to mention that he was injured. They couldn't be on the run until sunrise. "We need to find a person. Do you have someone in mind?" "I need to find Hyodama." "Where is he?" "Tokyo." It wasn't far, but Tokyo was crowded with people. There was no going back if the enemies ran rampant in the middle of the city. Wujin gritted his teeth and sped up. His spiritual power was recovering slowly, but Wujin was fast without it anyway. Enough for his enemies to be shocked by his speed. Wujin glanced back. Shinatsu's wound wasn't getting any better but the iron fan gave them a chance. Wujin said to a Mikami, "Have Hyodama come our way. We'll meet in the middle." A Mikami then took out a phone and placed a call. After talking on the phone briefly, she hung up and Wujin asked again, "Why didn't you ask for help earlier? He's not very useful at fighting, and how is he going to help us now?" "We need the golden bell that he created." "Golden bell?" A Mikami nodded. "That will stop Tsukaimi's power." But holding back Tsukaimi's power wasn't the only problem here. What about Suzuno? He had lost miserably and Suzuno seemed to be fine. Wujin then felt Tsukaimi's demonic energy from below and jumped. The place he jumped up from was destroyed instantly. He sped up even more. They couldn't get caught yet. He wasn't sure what a Mikami was trying to do, but she said that finding the object will take care of Tsukaimi. Then they would only have to deal with Suzuno. A Mikami asked, "You ran out of spiritual power. What happened?" "I used it all while fighting Suzuno." "Then I will give some to you." A Mikami then placed her hand on Wujin's back and sent her spiritual power into Wujin's body. The amount he received was almost equal to the energy he originally had. He felt it and quickened his pace. Bihung ranted, "Shinatsu, do you have anything you can give to me?" "Shut up." Shinatsu then swung his fan, but the enemies seemed to have learned how to avoid being pushed back by the fan now and they were much closer. As Wujin ran, he saw a Mini Cooper approaching from the other side. The car stopped immediately and a white-haired man came out. A Mikami identified the man. "It's Hyodama." Wujin flew up and landed in front of Hyodama who opened his eyes wide in shock. "What happened?" "My second and youngest siblings are trying to kill me." Hyodama then turned to Bihung and Shinatsu who just arrived. "Shinatsu-sama?" "Hyodama, what are you doing here?" "A Mikami-sama called me." "It seems like I shouldn't meddle with this problem." That was when Tsukaimi and her allies arrived. Hyodama sighed as he realized Tsukaimi's demonic energy. "I see why you called me." A Mikami spoke with a faint smile. "Help me." Hyodama nodded and pulled out the golden bell. "I can control that energy. but I will need a chance. I can't press it down from afar." A Mikami chuckled. "I didn't expect to receive help from the bell that once stopped me. Remember, you need to get me as close as possible." Bihung then turned to Shinetsu. "Shall we do it together?" "Do what?" "Make the wind." Shinetsu brought up the fan and swung it while Bihung snapped his fingers. The storm then combined itself with the Dokbi fire. It was a powerful attack, as the fiery storm gushed out against the enemies, thus hindering their view. Yudodama began ringing his bell. He then began reading some enchantments and the demonic energy began to subside. That's when Suzunu's wave of spiritual power began to sweep the storm out. "Someone needs to put this bell on Tsukimi." Wujin reached out. "Do I just need to put it on her?" "Yeah." Wujin nodded and jumped out. As Suzunu was putting out the fiery storm, Wujin ran past the enemies. He had enough spiritual power to break through. Takumi launched thunder at him, but he wrapped himself with the cloak of vampire bat and dashed forward. He then saw the space in front of him becoming distorted but didn't stop his charge. He felt crushing pain coming from his leg, but it was only his skin and muscle. His bones could endure it. Soon, he was in front of Tsukimi. Wujin threw his fist with the bell into her stomach. Kai-ah! The bell began to flash words of golden light, wrapping itself around Tsukimi. Wujin then quickly hopped back as he saw Tsukimi's energy. The sword dropped where Wujin had previously been. Suzunu reached to take off the bell, but there was a curse on it that did not allow him to touch it. Yudodama. Suzunu turned to Yudodama behind a Mikami. He hid himself behind a Mikami at Suzunu's glare. Wujin sighed. "This will make things equal." Suzunu then glanced at Tsukimi, who seemed to be in pain, and put the sword over his shoulder while smiling viciously. "I guess I should teach you why I am called the God of Storm." His energy then began to grow violent. Wujin then realized the Suzunu he fought against earlier wasn't at his full power. Bihung said, "We sealed Tsukimi and awakened Suzunu. It feels like we just walked into a lion's cave." Bihung and Shinetsu commented and Wujin snapped, "Just tell me how we should fight him." A Mikami can handle Suzunu's spiritual power, but it is up to you to stop his body. Wujin nodded to Bihung. "Just stop his spiritual power attacks and I will pin him down." A Mikami said to Wujin, "We just need to hold out until sunrise." "We will try." Wujin walked up, blocking a Mikami, and Yudodama said, "I will protect you." A Mikami-sama. He was a shaman who was scared of fighting, but knew basic magic tricks that would help him survive. Wujin then walked out. Suzunu smiled coldly. He enjoyed fighting Wujin, but he couldn't let their plan to fail. Suzunu charged and Wujin also did the same. That's when fierce light was unleashed upon Suzunu. Suzunu tried to cut the light away with his sword, but Wujin got close and struck Gram down. Suzunu brought his sword up to defend. However, he couldn't put his spiritual power into the sword as he had to defend against a Mikami, so the shock made the ground crack. "I am astonished." Suzunu spoke honestly and focused spiritual power to swing Wujin to the back. Wujin was surprised. He didn't know there was a way to focus spiritual power into one place to make it become much stronger. He glanced and saw that Bihung and Shinetsu weren't doing too hot either. "So, I have to defeat you then," Wujin said in front of the strongest Japanese avatar. Chapter 80, Sunrise. 2. Suzunu attacked. Wujin brought his gram high up into the air. He wasn't used to fighting with spiritual power yet, but he had learned how to use the little amount of power he had. It was a skill to send spiritual power to where he needed it to go. He tried to focus the power into his leg, but it didn't work that well. He still jumped anyway. As Wujin ran forward, a Mikami shot a ray of light out, covering Wujin and decreasing Suzunu's spiritual power coming from the other side. Suzunu had to defend himself from the light with his spiritual power, and when his armor was removed because of that, Wujin swung Gram. With his spiritual power and a Mikami's help, Wujin's power was much stronger than when he fought with Suzunu earlier. On the other hand, Suzunu was also different, and that difference pushed Suzunu back as he brought his sword up to defend. Wujin then pulled back and threw his fist at Wujin. Suzunu, however, dodged it and rammed into Wujin with his shoulder. Wujin focused spiritual power onto his chest, but the pain almost vibrated through his bones. Wujin was barely able to prevent being thrown to the back. and he then threw his head at his enemy. Susanoo also threw his head at the same time. However, Wujin smiled. The headbutt was only a diversion. Wujin summoned Guybulg from his hands that grabbed Susanoo's neck, and Susanoo quickly swung in that slight moment. It almost cut Wujin's hand off if he wasn't fast enough, but the attack was a success. He had a cut that ran from his elbow to his wrist, and Guybulg was stuck. It was already spreading itself over Susanoo's chest. Susanoo couldn't pull Guybulg out. It now had penetrated his heart and lung, so pulling it out meant instant death. Susanoo laughed hollowly, realizing that Wujin did not use Guybulg even when he lost his consciousness. If he used it then, Susanoo would have been ready for it. He looked up and saw a Mikami behind Wujin. Ugh! He vomited blood. He then brought up his sword and focused all his spiritual power into it. The spiritual power that seemed to go beyond the limit of the sword, and Wujin couldn't dare to attack. There was only one way to stop it. Wujin reached out to call Guybulg back. Susanoo was pulled out of the spear that penetrated his heart and lung, and blood began to gush out like a waterfall. The cloak of Vampire Bat tried to fly toward the scent of blood, but Wujin ordered it not to move. The spiritual power coming from Susanoo's body was more than Tsukaumi's demonic energy under the full moon. A Mikami then put up her mirror and sent a ray of light at Susanoo. It didn't seem like it was going to work as it was too concentrated now. A Mikami then shouted, "Run!" Wujin shook his head. He had no chance to run anymore as Susanoo was already holding up his sword. Wujin then threw his spear, since that was the only chance he had of piercing through the overbearing spiritual power. The spear penetrated its target, and instead of slapping the sword away, Susanoo took in the spear. He then threw down his sword. Damn it! He had swung his sword, but it felt like the sky was falling apart. Wujin knew he had no way to attack through that with his gram. That's when Bihung and Shinatsu walked up to use his fan. Shinatsu and Bihung worked together to create the fiery storm again, and Mikami sighed as she placed her hand on Wujin's back. All of Mikami's spiritual power began rushing into Wujin's body. He felt like he could do anything with such power. Wujin focused on Gram again. The spiritual power sizzled as if Gram contained the sun. It was so powerful that Gram began to crack. It would only last for one attack. Wujin slashed it from top to bottom. The attack could cut open the sea and the sky. In the end, Susanoo's body was cut in half. He was shocked by the fact that he was going to die. He knew he was dead, but the wave of energy he unleashed destroyed the streets in the surroundings and even the local forest. Wujin and the others were the only ones that remained. Wujin's gram then shattered and turned into silver dust. He then realized what just happened. A ground almost equal to town was swept away by Susanoo's attack. If Wujin did not block his attack, the spiritual power would have probably done much more damage than just wiping out some town-sized piece of land. Susanoo smiled in his defeated state and smiled. His body was cut into two and blood was gushing out from his chest, but he hadn't perished yet. That was a good sword. And with that, he was cut into two and the smoke began to burn from his heart. Wujin frowned. It meant the spiritual stone was being removed. That meant only one thing. He had attacked his own spiritual stone. Takemi and Amano looked at each other with shocked expressions and began to run while carrying Tsukaumi. Wujin took Guybulg out, but he began to tremble. Damn it! Blood began dripping from Wujin's nose. It was because of the fact that the spiritual power too strong for his body and had passed through him. Wujin fell to his knees and Hyodama shouted, "We can't let them run." Wujin turned to Bihung. "Bihung? I'm counting on you." Wujin handed one of the spears over to Bihung, who then laughed. "I guess I'm the only one who's healthy." Bihung wasn't free of injuries, of course, but he chased after the enemies and Shinatsu followed him. Wujin then vomited blood and a Mikami came up to him to place her hand on his back. "Try this." A Mikami was also pale. Susanoo's attack was that powerful, so a Mikami had to use all of her spiritual power to defend against it. However, she didn't think Wujin would have used all the power she gave to him, although it allowed them to defeat Susanoo. Susanoo had now lost his avatar. It would take hundreds of years to create another avatar, but a Mikami had to help Wujin as she couldn't let Tsukaumi get away. The spiritual power a Mikami gave this time was different. It moved into Wujin's body and moved on its own. It felt like Wujin had just taken in a sun. or a spiritual stone inside him. It was small, but it was enough to increase his spiritual power by 2 folds. It was a new feeling of spiritual power. Woo! The recovery of spiritual power did not heal his wounds, but at least it gave him enough power to launch one last attack. Wujin pulled Guybulg back and looked at his enemies running away in the distance. They were still in range. Wujin then focused his spiritual power and the cloak expanded, and with its power, Wujin threw Guybulg. Guybulg pierced through the air like a lightning bolt, and Take Me quickly called the lightning upon it. Yet, the spear still penetrated through. The lightning clash did decrease Guybulg's power, but they slowed down because of it, and Take Me had to stop to deflect Guybulg. Behyung and Shinatsu caught up to them and began to attack. Wujin then focused on Guybulg, while Behyung and Shinatsu attracted their attention. Wujin moved Guybulg and it flew toward Tsukuyomi and into her heart. Tsukuyomi dropped and Wujin also dropped to the ground. He couldn't even move anymore, but saw a Mikami looking to where Tsukuyomi had fallen. Wujin silently watched the tears welling in a Mikami's eyes. I am alone again. Wujin felt sorry after hearing the sad voice. He had killed both Susanoo and Tsukuyomi himself. He then looked at the full moon and a face popped up in his view. Are you okay? Wujin smiled at Mayo, who was hiding his view. Why are you back? To take your body back, just in case. You know, Wujin laughed. She should have come later if that was her real purpose, and she shouldn't have weapons in her hand if she was going to lie. Chapter 81, Sunrise. 3. Take Me and Ameno ran away. Wujin couldn't move and Behyung and Shinatsu were also injured, so they had no way to chase after them. Behyung handed over the spear to Wujin, who changed it back to the bracelet, and Behyung reached out to Shinatsu. Give it back now. I am jealous. Tell me anytime if you want to sell it. Behyung scoffed. He was borrowing it too, but of course, Behyung didn't say this to Shinatsu. Instead, he was looking at Wujin with a rare smile. I will pay whatever price you want. Shinatsu would be really powerful with the iron fan, but Shinatsu returned it to Behyung without any hesitation. Wujin spoke while Mayo helped him stand up. Anyway, we should move. We can't stay here. They all nodded. The area had been decimated by Susanoo's attack and a Mikami wasn't well. A Mikami took out her phone to make a call, and Wujin asked Mayo to help him walk over to Susanoo. He let go of the cloak of Vampire Bat and the cloak began to absorb the blood splattered all over the ground. He couldn't get the spiritual stone, but at least he was able to get the blood. The cloak returned and there was no more blood. When Wujin tried to walk toward Tsukuyomi's body, a Mikami grabbed his wrist. She asked with a pale face, are you going to suck her blood too? Their bodies were going to perish anyway. Wujin was going to absorb them so he could be prepared for more powerful enemies. Wujin nodded and a Mikami said, I will take the spiritual stone out for you, but I don't want to see her become like that. Wujin then looked at Susanoo's body. The half-sliced body had turned into a mummy. Wujin nodded. He couldn't dare to make a Mikami become his enemy now, and she already allowed him to take the spiritual stone. Okay. A Mikami cut open Tsukuyomi's body herself and pulled out the spiritual stone. She then placed it over Wujin's heart. With her 2 hands together, light began to shine and the spiritual stone was absorbed into Wujin's chest. What? Wujin was shocked as he was going to feed it to his heart, but now the stone had come into him. He felt the stone placing itself in his heart and looked at a Mikami. She smiled. It is your job to melt it away. A Mikami realized that whoever Wujin was, his problem was his lack of spiritual power. The only way to solve it was to plant it into his body. Ugh! Planting it into Wujin's body was enough for a Mikami to reach her energy limit. She coughed blood and Wujin helped her. Are you okay? I should get some rest now. A Mikami turned to Hyodama. Please carry Tsukuyomi. Yes. Hyodama went over to pick up Tsukuyomi and Ryota walked toward them. A Mikami asked with a faint smile, can you help me? I'm honored. Ryota helped her and a Mikami answered with a smile, thank you. Ryota seemed like he was happy too and Wujin asked, where are we going? Tokyo. That's when a helicopter flew over to them. Soon, they were on the aircraft, flying toward Tokyo. They all checked into a room at the Tokyo Station Hotel and got some rest. Wujin couldn't move freely, stuck lying down on the bed. The spiritual stone and the piece of a Mikami's spiritual stone had been placed within his heart. but he had overused the spiritual power and couldn't move. Mayo was at his side, helping him. I can't heal you in your current state even with the orb. I know, and I don't want you to use the orb. Wu Jin couldn't ask her to use the orb because he knew what it meant to her. Right now, he needed time to heal. He tried to prop his body up and Mayo helped him. Wu Jin laughed and leaned his back against the wall. Can you turn on the TV? Mayo turned on the TV with the remote control and Wu Jin flipped through some channels. He looked at various news channels and frowned. Damn it, the Day of Chaos was a success. All news was reporting special news of miracles and fights happening between avatars. Britain and France have been hit. Representatives of Britain and France had been killed. The Chinese press on the other hand was silent, meaning Sun Wukong had defended himself. It was also good to see that India was quiet too. Can that be shown on the news? Wu Jin saw a werewolf howling above London's City Hall and there were gargoyles picking off people from the air in France. That's what they get for not heeding to Behyung's warning. It wasn't only Britain and France however. Most European countries showed avatars and monsters in the news. It only meant that their representatives were either killed or badly injured. Wu Jin sighed and a Makami came in with a wheelchair. Ryota was pushing it and Behyung, Shinetsu, and Hyudo Dama followed behind. Wu Jin turned and Behyung noticed the TV. So, you were watching? A Makami added. There have been multiple sightings of monsters and avatars in Japan too. I put a stop on them, but I don't know how long we can hold it off. It was good that they stopped it for Japan, but Europe had lost it so it was only a matter of time. This was also why Amwon started this phenomenon globally. Wu Jin sighed. The world will fall into chaos. Yeah, what should I tell those fools that didn't listen to my warning? A Makami then turned to Wu Jin and asked, what will happen now? This is only the beginning. They began to make a move after the Day of Chaos. They drew the attention of avatars and prepared to summon the otherworldly god. Whatever happened, happened. There was no going back. How many Bakegunis do you catch per year in Japan? Bakeguni. A Makami didn't really pay any attention to that. A Bakeguni was a crab-shaped monster that was hard to hunt because of their tough shell. Avatars would die while hunting them but avatars had nothing to gain from killing them anyway so they never really touched the Bakeguni. Shinetsu answered instead. We set up a barrier and kill those that come out of it. We can't waste time killing them. Hyudo Dama also nodded. I think we kill probably 1 or 2 a year. Then I guess there'll be a lot inside? I haven't checked it myself, but I guess so. Yes, Wu Jin smiled. Can you tell me where the barrier is then? What are you trying to do? Since the barrier between reality and the other world is broken, avatars won't be enough to stop them. Behyung was confused. Yeah, but what does it have to do with the Bakeguni? Wu Jin turned to the avatars in front of him. We can't only rely on avatars now. What we need now are hunters. Hunter? The avatars frowned as they were aware of how pitiful hunters were in terms of power. They are not a big help now, but that's why we need to kill monsters like the Bakeguni and the others. You want to arm hunters by killing Bakegunis? Wu Jin nodded and Behyung asked, do you think armed hunters will be a threat to avatars? No, not to that extent, but they will be strong enough to hunt down monsters. Wu Jin knew that avatars did not like the idea of hunters growing in power. However, he also knew that even if the hunters' equipment got better, they wouldn't dare to attack avatars anyway. We'll see things happen that we never imagined before. We can't stop everything with only avatars. Behyung heard Wu Jin say those words with certainty and he asked the question he had long been wondering about. Wu Jin? Wu Jin turned and Behyung started calmly. I always thought you had a good hunch. I thought it was your intuition or some sort. But a Makami was attacked as you said. And now things that shouldn't have happened have really happened. Wu Jin became silent and Behyung asked, do you see the future, like Granny Mago? Wu Jin hesitated at Behyung's question. He had witnessed this with these people before, and he had faced it all with them, including the difficulties that lied ahead. I saw the future. There were avatars who could read the future, and there were some who were highly accurate at that too. Demons will move the avatars from behind and unleash monsters in the world. It will take a long time for the world to fight back, and they will prepare to summon the otherworldly god. And when the god is summoned, this world will came to an end. Byung frowned. Granny Mago didn't say a lot of things because she was bound to the rule of the skies. But she said that the skies had stopped moving forward at some point. Maybe it was proof that the world was going to an end. That's more detailed than any future reading I've ever heard, but it is convincing. I told you I saw it. Byung decided to believe Woojin. If his words were even slightly true, they had to be prepared. Byung turned to a Makami and she turned to Byung. I will do whatever I can. Woojin then turned to Shinatsu. Let's ask avatars to kill some Baekgenis then. Shinatsu frowned. He was one of highest-ranking avatars among avatars. But to ask others to help hunt Baekgenis? Hey! Shinatsu looked coldly at Woojin, but Woojin answered calmly. We need Baekgenis, as much as possible. Do you want avatars to move for such thing? Baekgenis were like insects to Shinatsu. He could only be annoyed for needing to move for such a petty job. A Makami then asked, what are you going to do after catching them? Send them over to Korea. You want Baekgenis in Korea? Woojin nodded and a Makami turned to Byung, not understanding what was going on. Byung also turned back to Woojin and asked, what are you up to? I will upgrade the hunters' weapons. We'll need a few monsters starting from the Baekgeni to upgrade the weapons to fight back. Against who? The ones who started all this. A Makami clenched her fist. The one that Woojin spoke of was the culprit behind that made her fight against her siblings. Shinatsu, call all avatars and hunt down Baekgenis. I want you to oversee it. Shinatsu bowed. I understand. Woojin then turned to Byung. We'll go back to Korea. We've got a lot of work to do. I'll get on it. And when Woojin heard Byung's answer, the sky became to brighten up. It was a brand new day in a world where the chaos had begun. Chapter 82, Preparation. 1. The world was turned upside down. Starting from the news, sightings of the monsters were shown through various media outlets and people shivered in terror. Some speculated it to be a movie shoot at first, but constant reportings and sightings made them believe that it was real. But while some countries saw monsters and legendary beings appearing, there were some countries that didn't see any of that. Korea was one such country. Bim played a good substitute while Byung was gone. Byung was astonished. I think you fit better in that position. No, brother, I am better off in the field. No, it's too dangerous. Byung then grabbed a bottle of whiskey. Woojin sat down in front of Bum and said, you did a good job. Nothing much happened here. Really? Yeah, we wiped out vampires and killed demons. That's probably why they didn't think about doing it here. Woojin was thankful for that. He didn't intend on it when he killed them, but it eventually was a good idea for Korea. I received a call from China. China? Yeah, Mr. Sun butchered 2 betrayers and wanted to say thanks. I should give him a call. Woojin smiled and Bum answered. But you need to go down to Jeju first. Jeju? Granny Mago called too. She wanted you and brother to go to Jeju as soon as you guys returned. She could have called me directly. Byung shook his head in response. That's impossible. She's out of reach. We have a dedicated shell that connects to her here in the company. It's too dangerous to carry it around, so we keep it here. Woojin realized for the first time that they weren't using a regular phone to contact Mago and smiled. Okay, I have business to deal with in Seoul. We'll leave for Jeju tomorrow. Yeah, I have to rest too. Woojin then turned to Byung and reminded him. Take care of Ryota. Don't worry about him. I've prepared an office for him with everything he needs. He should be busy setting up right now. Thanks. If he is that promising, then I guess we can invest that much. The situation wasn't as bad as when Woojin first spoke, but now, they really needed a program to track down avatars so they could fight them. Bum asked, where's Mayo? She went to Mount Jiri. Her orb had gotten smaller while saving Woojin, so she had to train her spiritual power. She was given a satellite phone in case they needed to contact her. I'll be back. Woojin then came out and took out his phone. Woojin then went to Old Huang's place. He greeted Woojin with a smile. You're here. You look happy. Yeah. I'm getting quite a bit of money with everything that's happening. Old Huang had taken the opportunity during the chaos to sell more weapons. Woojin smiled. I need something. Oh, but what happened in Japan? It's expensive information. Old Huang understood. However, he grinned. I guess a Makami is alive and well. seeing that they are quiet. But what's in the bag? Woojin tapped on the box that held Kusanagi no Ken that Amakami gave to him but didn't answer. Old Huang didn't expect to hear the answer anyway. So, why did you want to see me again? I need a few things. I welcome customers any day. What do you need? I need the blood of a merman. How much? As much as you can get. Can you pay for it? I have a source for the payment. Don't worry about that. Sure, I'll see what I can do. Where do you want it sent to? Do you have any at the moment? Just a bit. Then can I get those first? Sure. Any others? Do you have bacony shells? Bacony shells? That thing is useless but its rarity drives the cost up. I just need a little. He was going to get more supplies from Amakami soon, so he just needed a little right now. Hold on. Old Huang went to the back and returned with a small bottle and a palm-sized shell. This is all I have. How much is it? I'll just give this to you since you will purchase it in large bulk soon. Thank you. Woojin then got the item and stood up. Old Huang spoke with a smile. It looks like I'll be busy. Korea is quiet now, but the other countries are in mess. Are you going out of the country? Call me anytime. My subordinate will be here. I'll tell him about my VIP customer. What number should I call? Just call me and I'll connect you to him. But you can just visit this place too. Okay, I'll call you next time. Yeah, I'll give you a call before I leave so we can have dinner together. Yeah. Woojin then came out and called Dr. An before going over to meet with him. He still seemed exhausted from his research, but he was well. Good. I was waiting to share my excitement with you. Excitement? Dr. An spoke with a bright smile. I finally found what fits me. You have succeeded with the Avatar project. Yes. Did you try it? Dr. An then frowned and answered, Number. I couldn't dare to go through the same pain you suffered. That's I waited for you. For me, I think I can stand the pain if you stay by my side. Woojin then smiled and reached out with his hand. Then before you try it out, you have to check one thing. About what? Armor-piercing bullets are not enough. I need a stronger weapon for the hunters. We need to make a different kind of bullet. Bullet? Look. Woojin took out the bacony shell and merman blood. Dr. An checked it and asked, why did you bring these? Woojin cracked the shell with his strength and dumped it into the blood. The shell began to boil and Woojin took it out to show to Dr. An. Let's go in. They went into the lab and Dr. An began checking the density of the shell that was dumped into the blood. A bacony shell and merman blood. How did you find this combination? Dr. An had discovered it in the past, but Woojin did not give an explanation. But as far as he knew, there was more to it that he couldn't remember. There are some things I want to test. Maybe we can make it denser. This alone is stronger than the armor-piercing bullet itself. I know. But there are things that can't penetrate in its current state. Dr. An brought up a few data points and smiled. Yes. This will do. What he took out was the sand of Sandman. He put it in a box and the shell in it and burned it all together. Then he took out the shell to check the density again. This will work against any type of monster. This is amazing. Woojin tried to crush it in his hand but it didn't budge. It required his spiritual power if he really wanted to crush it. He then brought up the power to crush it into dust and Dr. An said, it sure is different after becoming an avatar. Woojin smiled. Oh, and I can't use Cocktail Demon anymore. But didn't it work before? All of my dragon blood is gone, so I lose consciousness when I use it. We need to fix it. I'll take a look, but I'll need more bacony shells if you want me to make more bullets. I don't need it for myself. Can you find a company to handle producing it in large amounts? Company. We'll sell it to hunters. Bacony shells are hard to get, let alone merman blood. I'll have them in bulk soon. Then we will find a company in Korea. Dr. An then took a deep breath and said, then is it my turn now? Of course, Avatar Project. The chance of success was 100% as they tried once and succeeded. But Woojin was thinking the chance was at 50%. He wasn't sure if it was a good idea to have Dr. An undergo such a dangerous test, but this test had allowed Woojin to get the help he needed from Dr. An, so he couldn't stop him. Doctor, do you really need to do this? It is my life's dream. Woojin couldn't stop him anymore. Let's do it. Dr. An lied down on the bed with the bindings and Woojin put the straps over him. Dr. An asked, How painful was it? More than you can imagine. Woojin put a towel over Dr. An's mouth so he couldn't bite his tongue. Their eyes met and Dr. An nodded. Woojin turned and saw Brunhilde coming up to them. She took the syringe and looked at Dr. An. While Brunhilde looked at Dr. An, Woojin realized why Dr. An wanted to become an avatar so badly. Woojin hadn't known this until now, but he understood when he saw them looking at each other now. So, this was the reason why Brunhilde was working for Dr. An after all this time. Woojin grabbed Dr. An's hand and reassured him, "It will all work out." Dr. An then turned to Brunhilde and she nodded and injected the syringe into his neck. His eyes turned wide and his body began to shiver. His eyes turned red and he began to tremble severely. Woojin held him down and mumbled, "You have to endure it." Chapter 83, Preparation. 2. Dr. An passed out from the intense pain and Brunhilde turned to Woojin. He didn't say much. Dr. An's body was changing into the body of an avatar. The pain was more than what Woojin could bear even though he had experienced many types of pain. Thus, there was no way Dr. An could withstand it. For the doctor, it was better he passed out. Dr. An's body kept on trembling even in his passed out state and soon calmed down. Brunhilde wiped the sweat off from Dr. An and asked, "Do you think it worked?" "It looks like it worked." He wasn't twisted nor had his strength increased. It looked like he used more of Sami's blood. Dr. An then opened his eyes. He looked around with his reddened eyes and gasped. Brunhilde took out the towel from his mouth and he said, "Get me off please." Woojin released the bindings. Dr. An rose up and covered his eyes while breathing heavily and asked, "Did you always live in such a world?" Woojin answered with a smile, "It must be a new feeling." "You never tried a cocktail on yourself, did you?" "I did once. I never wanted to feel that loss again, so I never tried it again." Dr. An then put down his hands, looked around, and flexed. "So this is spiritual power?" Sami was an avatar who used spiritual power extensively. It seemed her blood allowed Dr. An to be more sensitive to spiritual power. He stood up to look into the mirror and he was surprised. "I didn't become younger." "Yes, but that doesn't mean you didn't become an avatar." Dr. An still looked like a middle-aged man, but he was going to age very slowly from now on. It seemed he needed more time to adapt to his heightened senses. Dr. An then realized that his brain had awakened. It looked like he could use the spiritual power to do studies and research. Maybe he could even try creating a divine object. Dr. An then turned to Woojin and flinched. From his clothes to the long box he was holding, there was spiritual power in all of those items. "Is that a divine object?" Woojin then thought he should use a spiritual power seal the next time and took out the sword. Dr. An was astonished and Brunhilde asked, "Isn't that the Kusanagi no Ken? You recognize it? How did you get it?" "It belongs to Susanoo. He is dead." Brunhilde looked at Woojin in surprise. Dr. An asked, "Can I analyze this for a minute?" "Of course. How long do you need?" "I don't know. Let me give it a try." Dr. An began studying the sword and busily started creating something. Woojin decided to wait. After 2 hours, Dr. An came back with a bright smile on his face. "I did it." "What did you make?" "It's a portable analyzer. This will let you analyze a piece of equipment from anywhere. Try putting it down closely." "How about we do it outside?" "Outside?" Woojin explained. "I'm going to have a drink. Why don't you guys come too?" Brunhilde hesitated and Woojin continued, "Hasn't it been a while since you went outside?" Brunhilde looked tempted as she certainly hadn't gone out of the building very often after staying with Dr. An, and the doctor finally nodded. "Okay, I guess we can do that." Dr. An then prepared himself with a bag full of stuff and turned to Woojin. "Let's go." "You put the analyzer in your bag." Woojin then grabbed the sword and analyzer in the bag and came out. Brunhilde was waiting for them in a Cadillac Escalade. Dr. An got into the front seat and Woojin took a seat in the back. "Where are we going?" "We are going to Byung's office." Brunhilde seemed to be happy while driving and Dr. An reached out to grab her right hand. Woojin just sat in the back seat silently. He then became curious about Dr. An's reaction to the iron fan since he had Sami's blood. They went to Byung's office and they also found Kim Bum and Yoong there, already drinking. Byung was surprised to see them. "Huh? Dr. An, Brunhilde?" Dr. An or Brunhilde never usually left their lab and Woojin said, I think we need more drinks. Of course, come and have a seat. Dr. Ann and Brunhilde sat down and Bum gave them makgeolli, or Korean rice wine. They began to drink. Baehyung kept on offering more drinks and Woojin drank away. Baehyung talked about what happened in Japan and after a while, Dr. Ann's face was flushed, seemingly drunk. He looked at Baehyung and asked, "Bye, what's that on your chest?" Baehyung took out the iron fan. "Oh, this is the iron fan. Anyway, Shinatsu was better at using it. Can I have a look?" "Go ahead." Baehyung gave the fan to Dr. Ann. The doctor smiled and flapped it lightly. A small storm gushed out in Baehyung's office and turned the table upside down, throwing the avatars off their seats. Woojin jumped but the second wind stopped him, and before he got to Dr. Ann, Brunhilde had already appeared and knocked Dr. Ann down. She then grabbed Dr. Ann and apologized. "I'm sorry." Baehyung shook his head and took the iron fan from Dr. Ann's hand. Since when did he become an avatar? If Baehyung knew Dr. Ann could use spiritual power, he would not have given it to him. He was not able to control the power and he was drunk. The party was over now. Brunhilde answered simply, "Today." Baehyung then turned to Woojin. He knew Woojin had become an avatar, but knew it wasn't an easy thing to do. He then gave a card to Brunhilde. "Go check in at the hotel in the next building over. I will need to talk with Dr. Ann when he wakes up." "Thanks." Brunhilde then went out and Woojin tried to follow but she shook her head. Baehyung also grabbed Woojin's shoulder. "Where are you going?" Woojin then turned around. Kim Bum and Yeong were cleaning the office. Woojin tried to help but Baehyung placed the sofa back and offered Woojin a seat. "Can anyone become an avatar?" "Number. We only succeeded in making 2. There is a low chance and we ran out of materials, so it will be hard to try again." Baehyung grimaced and said, "Make sure nobody knows of this. It's better we keep it secret." "I know." Woojin knew that this research should be kept a secret. Baehyung swung the iron fan and said, "I think he used it like Shinatsu. He fits this much better." It was probably because he used Sami's blood, but Woojin did not mention that. He spoke while watching them prepare another table to continue drinking. "Baehyung, we need to buy out a defense contractor." Baehyung looked at Woojin and asked, "You need an investment?" Woojin nodded. "Then what am I getting out of it?" "Buy one under my name and I will lend you the iron fan for free." "Really? What do you think?" "Deal." Chapter 84, Preparation 3. Woojin was going to develop hunter weapons by managing a defense contractor company. The lead developer he had in mind was of course Dr. Ann. However, he was thinking about how he was going to ask Dr. Ann to join in and Baehyung gave him a simple answer. Just make him a portable lab. He didn't think of such an option. Woojin had the money, but he didn't have that much money. Baehyung continued, "Use a container to get him a lab. We can bring it out of the country when we need to." Monsters were not appearing in Korea since Woojin and Baehyung had stopped it from happening. But with the Day of Chaos, the need for hunters would rise over around the world. Woojin would soon have to move out of the country to track down Dimitri and Amwon. "Bum is not strong enough to move around with you, so I'll tag along. I will spend as much as I can if it's going to help us." It was great that Baehyung was willing to help. "Good. Let's ask him when he wakes up tomorrow. I need to know what he needs." "Good. We'll also need a jet for it then. It has to be big enough so we can haul a container." Baehyung then took a tablet and scanned through a catalog. It was a catalog of private jets. Woojin laughed as there was a way to customize the interior. These Dokbas were always much more than what he imagined. Baehyung said to Woojin, "It's you who's going to be flying this thing. Take a look." "Are you buying me a jet?" "I'm just lending one to you." Woojin smiled and looked at the catalog. He looked at Boeing 747-8 that could be transformed into a flying fortress. It was especially tempting as it was going to replace the current Air Force One. "Let's get this." "Yeah. But Airbus is nice too." They began discussing about the jet while drinking. Dr. Ann felt a headache as he woke up from his sleep in the morning. He then noticed an arm over his chest and turned. There was Brunhilde, lying next to him naked. Did he make some kind of mistake? He couldn't remember anything and had a bad headache, but there he was. lying naked with Brunhilde. Dr. An was known genius in biomechanical science. He finished his PhD when he was 15 and began his own research. That's when the Hunters Guild reached out to him. The leader of the Hunters Guild showed him the ingredients of the new world, and Dr. An joined to study the world he had never heard of before. That was when he met Brunhilde, who was appointed to be his protector. Dr. An fell in love at first sight, but she kept her distance. That was how 25 years had passed. Dr. An wanted to become an avatar himself so he could get closer to Brunhilde. While researching, he came across the cocktail, which was a great hit, giving him more authority. What he wanted was Brunhilde. He kept Brunhilde as his protector and kept on studying. They became close, but they never touched each other's skin other than a handshake. He wasn't sure about what was going on now that they were in bed together. Brunhilde then opened her eyes and looked up at Dr. An. "You're awake." "I am not sure what's going on here. What happened yesterday?" Brunhilde then smoothly moved closer to Dr. An's body. He blushed and closed his eyes. Brunhilde leaned over him and whispered into his ear, "You don't remember?" Dr. An flinched and nodded while Brunhilde smiled and got up. Dr. An opened his eyes and Brunhilde already had a blanket wrapped around her body. "Wake up. We have to go to Byung's office to apologize." "Apologize? You destroyed his office by using his iron fan." Dr. An didn't remember any of that, but he shook his head and got up. He looked down at his naked body, blushed, and ran to the restroom. "Why am I naked anyway?" "You threw up all over your clothes." "Becoming an avatar doesn't make you a good drinker." Dr. An rarely drank, so it was bound to happen. He placed his head against the wall of the restroom and sighed. He then turned the faucet on and sighed as he began to take a shower. What did he think it was? He was drunk and Brunhilde just pulled a prank. It was unusual for her to make such a joke, but Dr. An felt like he was foolish for thinking otherwise. He tried to start washing when Brunhilde suddenly came in and hugged him from the back. She smiled at Dr. An's ears. "You haven't changed a bit even after 25 years. You're still a child." Dr. An turned and looked at Brunhilde's face. She had a beautiful face and body. Dr. An then kissed her. He felt her arm around him and thought he made a good choice to become an avatar. The result of the terrible pain was sweet. He was thankful for Woojin. She couldn't forget the eyes of the boy she met 20 years ago. He was a genius who was hired by the Hunters Guild leader himself. When she met him, Brunhilde saw the desire in his heart that made her heart beat. He was a mere human, but she never knew her heart would start to beat again at a mere boy's desire. However, he never showed his feelings to her, and neither did she. The boy became a young man and he started a new project, and on the day he failed and developed the cocktail instead, he became totally drunk and spoke to her about his avatar project and why he wanted to achieve that. Her heart began to beat faster. She then waited. She waited for the day for the man to succeed in his project and stand next to her. Finally, the day came, but he got drunk and was knocked out. So, she decided to play a joke and he got confused. It was cute. Brunhilde ran her finger down along Dr. An's chest. "Brunhilde." She looked up and Dr. An looked at her back. "I know it's a bit late to say this, but I fell in love with you at first sight." Brunhilde smiled. "I am now an avatar. Let's be together forever." Brunhilde looked directly into his eyes. "I would have done it even if you didn't become an avatar. We are already together." Brunhilde kissed Dr. An lightly and complained, "But you took too long." "It took you 25 years to say that." "I'm sorry I made you wait that long." "It's okay. We have each other now." They looked at each other and hugged, feeling each other's warmth. Dr. An and Brunhilde got dressed and went up to Byung's office. The doctor was shocked. The office that he was told that had been destroyed was clean and they were still drinking. "Oh, Dr. An." Byung greeted him and patted the sofa. "Come and drink." "It's okay." He couldn't drink again when he made a mess yesterday. Dr. An sat down and Woojin asked, "Doctor, can I ask you something?" Dr. An smiled as he was thankful for Woojin. "Of course." "Can you leave the Hunters Guild?" Dr. An was curious about the reason why. "Of course I can. They support me because I made the cocktail, but I am not exactly cost-effective." The cocktail was also a result of the failed Avatar project. He had spent a tremendous amount of money, but that was just a study for his dream. The Hunters Guild wanted the money back, so it seemed like they wouldn't let him leave the guild just like that. Wu Jin said to Dr. An and Brunhilde, "Then join us." "Join you? For what?" Wu Jin explained. "I saw the future. In that future, One and the demon kind summon the otherworldly god and Earth comes to an end. I want to stop it." "You saw the future?" "Yes, some avatars had the power to read the skies to tell the future, and their accuracy was very high." It seemed Wu Jin might have some kind of similar power, and he never lied to Dr. An. "You want to stop the end of the world? Stop the end of humankind?" It was too grand of an idea. Dr. An had thought about increasing his influence in the world of avatars, but this was unexpected. "I have Bihung and Amatras's support for that." Wu Jin told them that he had seen the future, rather than telling them that he had returned to the past to be more convincing. The credibility he gained by everything he had done made him believable. "So what help do you need from me?" Wu Jin nodded heavily. "Demons always have mysterious powers. We need to create weapons that will work against them, and we will need hunters equipped with more useful weapons. If monsters were set loose, the hunters should be deployed to deal with them, not avatars." However, the hunters only fought monsters in groups up until now. They needed better weapons. Dr. An was a genius in biomechanics, but Wu Jin also needed one more person from the United States for this plan. In addition, he also needed to talk to the leader of the Hunters Guild. "Join us." Bihung smiled. "If you agree, we will make you a mobile lab. You will get a container filled with all the equipment you need and a private helicopter. I am getting a private jet that will have sections dedicated to our members. If you want your lab inside the jet, you should sign up fast." Dr. An said with a smile, "Like I said, I'm not very cost-effective, but I know you have made some great achievements, so you will invest in me for it. I will get you the things that the Hunters Guild couldn't get for you. You will not have to worry about money." Dr. An nodded. His original goal was to become an avatar through the Avatar Project. He then decided to stop everything and send the finished cocktails to the Hunters Guild to properly leave the guild. "I'll meet with the leader and finish up everything before joining you." Bihung then smiled. "Is the leader Alfonso now? Do you know him?" "Of course, I'll do the talking with him. You just give the list for your lab and Bum here will get everything for you." Dr. An then became glad that he had come across a great opportunity and brought up a bowl of makgeolli. "Let's drink." Brunhilde then grabbed his wrist and replaced the bowl with a cup of Sprite. Everyone laughed and cheered. Chapter 85, Present 1. As Dr. An listed out what he needed in his mobile lab, Bum wrote it all down while shaking his eyebrows. It was even laughable that his thick eyebrows were twitching at the list. Bihung said, "Just do it. It's not even your money." "I didn't say anything." "And make 2 labs, just in case." Bum smiled. "I'll just spend it all then." "Yeah, do whatever you want." Bihung smiled. "You should learn how to use money." Bihung then reached out with his glass to Wu Jin. "Have a drink." Wu Jin drank the glass and turned to Bihung. "When are we going?" "To Granny." Wu Jin nodded and Bihung spoke after looking at the clock. "Let's leave at 12 p.m. We have 2 hours then." "Yeah, let's drink then." They began to drink, enjoying the relaxing moment. They rose up from their seats at 11:40. Yowang asked Wu Jin, "When are we going to spar?" "Ask Brunhilde for that." Oh, Brunhilde was also a professional in battle. Yowang was excited to hear that she could spar with a Valkyrie and turned. Brunhilde smiled. "Let's go." Bihung then made a bet. "I bet 100 million won for Yowang." Dr. An then placed a bet on Brunhilde. 100 million to Brunhilde. People then turned to Wu Jin and he answered with a smile. 100 million to Brunhilde. "Whoa. Are you really going to do that?" Wu Jin laughed and defended himself. "It's a bet. I'm not going to lose my money." "Have you fought against Brunhilde?" Wu Jin shook his head. "How come you bet on her instead of me?" Wu Jin then got up and turned to Bihung. "Let's go to Jeju. It's our private plane. We can go after we watch." Bihung said as he stood up. "Let's go see Yowang versus Brunhilde." Wu Jin then got up and Dr. An came up to him. "You acknowledge Brunhilde's power?" Wu Jin didn't say much but he looked at Brunhilde. Then the match between the two of them began. The result arrived quickly and it was Yoang who was a victor. Behyung and Bum hugged her in excitement while Dr. An embraced Brunhilde and looked after her. Behyung grinned. I was scared when you said Brunhilde had a better chance. She seems good, but was it because she didn't fight for too long? Woojin didn't think she would lose. It felt like she didn't show her true potential. I made a bet because I wanted to see her fight. Oh well. I'll send the money. Of course, you do that. And we should go now. Woojin then turned to Dr. An. Dr. An, stay here while I'm gone and make preparations for your lab. Okay, be careful. Woojin climbed up Mount Hala and went to Granny Mago's place. He saw a familiar face working on a field. Woojin Unso came running to him with a smile and Woojin asked, "Where's Granny?" "She's with guests." "Guests?" Woojin turned to Behyung and he walked forward with a shrug. "I guess she called others too." Woojin followed. "Let's talk later." "Yeah." Unso returned to the field and they walked. The door to the room opened and Granny poked her head out. "Come in quick." They walked in and there were 3 people in there. There was a well-built man in a black suit and a hat, a beautiful woman with traditional Korean clothes, and a white-haired old man. Behyung laughed. "Wow, I didn't expect to see such rare faces in one room." Woojin looked at all of them but he couldn't recognize any of them. He had a guess at the woman from her alluring atmosphere, but he wasn't sure. Granny Mago introduced them. "This is Behyung, you all know him, and he is Ko Woojin, the one that wiped out Wang Jinjin's family." The old man then smiled and answered, "We know Bai is working hard. And you, my friend, whose avatar are you to be achieving such feats?" Behyung snapped, "How about you introduce yourself first?" "Haha, you don't need to be snappy. I am a Dragon King of the Southern Seas." Woojin was surprised. He had heard about the Dragon Kings but they did not join the fight in the past. "Why was that?" "I am Ko Woojin." "Interesting man." The man with the suit scanned Woojin and said, "I am Himasu." Woojin flinched. The man that was known to be a son of the heavenly god. He didn't fight together with Woojin, but Himasu's fight in Manchuria was famous in the past. Woojin did not hear about how he died, but he had killed hundreds of monsters and avatars. And the woman introduced herself last. "I've heard a lot about you from Mayo." Woojin was then certain about who she was. "I heard my daughter has gotten a great amount of help from you." "It's nothing." Mayo only had 6 tails now, but her mother was already a Gmeo, and Woojin did not meet her in the past either. He turned to Granny Mago. "I thought we'd need as much as help we could get." Woojin turned to them. If he could receive assistance from what they had currently, that was going to be a great help. He didn't even want them to fight by his side. Woojin then looked at Granny Mago. What did she do in the past? Or did she do all this in the past but couldn't stop it from happening? It was different now. The day of chaos came early but it was imperfect in form. Amwon's plan had been compromised from the beginning. "What help can we get?" Dragon King smiled. "I can't use my power on land, so I'll just give you some treasures from the palace." "Haha. Old man, you're no use. I have some for you too." Behyung stopped talking. The treasure might even be a divine object so there was no need to raise complaints. Himasu then said, "If you need to work in Manchuria, I'll support you." That was a great help if something came up in that region. "Can I ask for your assistance in other places?" "I will go if you really need me." Woojin smiled and the woman said, "Mayo isn't much of help now, isn't she? I'll support her so she can be helpful." Mayo was already with them, so it was good to hear that her mother was going to help too. Woojin then turned to Granny Mago. "I think this is all I can do to help." "It is great." Woojin didn't think Granny Mago would have prepared him such a great present. She laughed. "Let's get something to eat then. I'll serve you all." Mago went out and Behyung looked around with his arms crossed. He then stopped the Gmeo. "I thought you didn't care about Mayo." "That's how our family lives." "But I do care about her. She's lacking." "Get her some equipment and stuff." "I should." Gmeo smiled and turned to Woojin. What he had done already would put him in legends and what he was going to do now was going to be more significant. Mayo needed a lot of support so she will not become a burden. Woojin did not had any more requests for her however. Gmeo stood up from her seat. I'll go help Granny then. She walked out and Bahyung turned to Himasu. How's your area? I have to run around trying to clean things up. Can you come all the way down here then? Himasu answered. It's Granny's call. Bahyung also nodded. Granny Mago still had influence over all of Korea. That's when she came in with a table full of food. Let's eat. Chapter 86, Present. 2. Himasu and Mio left right away after eating. The Dragon King left to talk with Bahyung and Woojin came out to talk with Unso. Did he send you the books? Look, Unso showed her room full of books. I have a lot of them. There were a lot of books with different genres and types. If you need more books, ask Granny. They had shells for communication, so Granny could call them to get any book she might need. So when can we leave this place? Unso and the others were still in hiding. There was a limit to just reading books. Woojin thought for a second and answered, I'm doing the best I can to get you out faster. Okay, do you want anything to eat? I want chocolate. Woojin laughed. Okay, I'll have them send over chocolate next time. Okay. Woojin got up and Bahyung came out with the Dragon King. Let's go. I've chosen gifts he will get us. They said their goodbyes to Granny Mago and went down the mountain to get on a yacht. They boarded the Dragon King's large lavish yacht and Woojin took the tablet from the Dragon King. Those are my treasures. I will give you the one you like. Choose one. Woojin looked at it. They all looked like divine objects. Bahyung added, I chose this. It was a fire starter stone but he wasn't sure what it was used for. Bahyung explained, it affects fire. My power will be multiplied. Bahyung was strong already, but if he got his hands on a divine object that fit his affinity, then that was great. Woojin also scanned the items and while the yacht sailed through the sea, he found what he wanted. Can I take these too? The Dragon King caressed his long beard and answered, you want the phoenix feather shoes and the water of life? Yes, the phoenix was a spiritual being that was considered more holy in the southern region. The feather shoes were created by using that phoenix. Woojin did not know what it might do, but it seemed like it was good enough to be called a divine object. The Dragon King thought for a moment and nodded. That will do. The water of life was like a healing potion. It was going to save the person from almost everything except death. The Dragon King flicked his finger and a man came in. Go and get this. The man nodded and moved out of the yacht to dive down. Woojin asked, where is he going? The treasure chest of the Dragon Palace. Does the Dragon Palace really exist? It's a secret. The Dragon King then took out some liquor and spoke to Bahyung. You should have a drink. You've done a great job so far. Bahyung mumbled as he grabbed the glass. You wouldn't have come out if it wasn't for Granny. Yes, honestly, I didn't think there were any issues that required us to come up, but I am trying to help as Granny Mago asked. You are just giving us a few treasures. Is that really helping us? A few treasures? You know those treasures have values that cannot be paid with money. Bahyung drank without answering and reached out for another. The Dragon King poured it into his glass. From what Granny said, the chaos this time is nothing. She told me she can't read the skies. Yeah, the burden must be weighing heavily on you then. Then give us more. No, that's not possible. Bahyung emptied the glass again and the Dragon King poured another glass. That's when someone jumped up from the water. It was the man who had gone down. He took out objects to set them down on the table and left. This is yours. Bahyung received the stone and tapped it. 2 Dokbi fireballs appeared around him. It really does give me twice the number of fires. That alone will be your greatest help. Bahyung smiled. This was a good boost to his power. Woojin then looked down at the shoes. The feather shoes had a fierce pattern. He couldn't wear it anywhere due to its flashy design. Can I change the shape? You want others to not look at it? Yeah, then. Do you have any design in mind? Woojin thought for a second and took out his phone to show the design of the Nike Air Jordan X. The Dragon King laughed and touched the feather shoes. Spiritual power came out of his hand and changed the shape of the shoes into the shape that Woojin had requested. Then he took the shoes and put them on. He was originally wearing the shoes that hid his presence, but he now had different shoes. How can I use this? If you put spiritual power in, you can walk on air. Over air? Check it. Woon then jumped out toward the sea. He had the cloak with him, so he could fly if it became dangerous. He sent spiritual power into the shoes and stepped in the air. He then felt as if he was lifted up. He then stomped on it strongly and saw the shockwave radiating out from it. The shoes could be a weapon as well. Wujin smiled as he returned to the yacht. He didn't melt Tsukimi's spiritual stone yet, but if he could, he would not suffer from the lack of spiritual power. If the hunter equipment got an upgrade, he was going to be really powerful. Wujin also received the water of life. Thank you for all these gifts. I am glad if they can help you. It's more than enough. Wujin smiled and Bihung asked, can you take us to Pusan? Of course. The yacht then made its way to Pusan and Bihung and Wujin drank. When they got to the port, the sun was going down already. They bid farewell to the Dragon King and Wujin commented as he saw yacht disappearing, we've got good stuff. It's not bad. It's amazing how Granny Mago can even call him up. Wujin glanced at Bihung. He was a representative of Korea but he wasn't strongest. All the avatars that had gathered at Granny Mago's house were all powerful avatars. We should have asked for more. Anyway, it's better that they just stay that way. I would not want Dragon Kings to come up and run rampant. Ugh, Dragon Kings? The Southern King was here as a representative. That's why I wanted to get more divine objects from him but he didn't give us much. Wujin smiled. So, are you going to meet Alfonso? Yeah, and talk about Dr. N. They moved toward the helicopter by car and continued their journey. Take me with you when you go to the United States? What for? I need to meet someone. Bihung narrowed his eyes. Who? I might be able to help. Smith. Bihung thought for a second and asked, you mean the CEO and lead researcher of Blacksmith Industry? Yeah, you know he's harder to meet than Alfonso, right? Yeah. But it's possible. Bihung crossed his arms and mumbled, what do you want from him? I'll give him an idea and get his technologies in return. Will he need your idea? I saw the future, remember? I'll give him an idea and sign a deal with him to start the mass production. Why don't you make it your own? I'm not that smart. Wujin only knew how to use the weapons. He did not know how to make them. Thus, he needed to get help from Smith, who was a genius that could make anything based off a description. I'll make an appointment. You do the talking. Of course. Chapter 87, Present. 3. Mount Jiri. It was the best place in Korea to train one's spiritual power. Lee Myo was meditating in the most concentrated place on the mountain. There was a small red orb floating in front of her eyes. It was spinning and the 6 tails she had created through spiritual power were floating also. Her balance had been destroyed since the orb became smaller, and she had to recover it so she could assist Wujin. That's when a voice came to her. You still take the hard ways instead of the easy way. Myo frowned and retracted the orb. She turned and Myo was there. Mother. Myo answered in a low and solemn voice and Myo raised her hand. The orb that appeared was much larger and intense. I always told you, it grows faster if you take in a man's energy. I guess you forgot that you left home because you hated that? Myo then looked around. Even if you train here, there is a limit. You won't succeed in completing the orb even after 100 years. I'll take care of myself just fine. Myo then took the orb back and looked at Myo. She was so different than her and reminded Myo of her husband. She sighed. Myo took the ring off her finger and placed it on the top of a rock she was sitting down on. Was he Wujin? Get yourself some power if you want to help. If you become his burden by being stubborn, think about if that is what you really wanted. Myo then disappeared and Myo became surprised to see the ring that she had left behind. It was a ring that was only given to them when they became Gmos. It was created with the particle of the first Gmyo's orb that gave great power. Myo took the ring and placed it on her left index finger. Wujin returned to Seoul and began training. He could only take 5 steps in the air with the feather shoes right now. The world was in turmoil but it wasn't time to move yet. They needed to wait for their enemies to show themselves in the midst of the chaos and attack all at once. Wujin told Bihung to keep an eye out and he asked Told Huang to call him when he found a 3rd or higher generation vampire from the Dmitri family. However, they hadn't shown themselves yet, so it was time to train. The Hunters Guild also began to reveal itself as monsters were set loose. The governments allowed them to carry weapons. Wujin swung the Kusanagi no Ken. It was a very durable sword. Gram was destroyed when it contained all the spiritual power of a Mikami. but this sword took the strike and it was still fine. It was better than any weapon Wujin had used before while wielding spiritual power. However, he still couldn't use that much spiritual power yet. Wujin then took the sword back and took out the bamboo spear. Using both spears at once was harder than expected, so he was training in that too. Not only that, but he also trained in throwing spears, and when that was over, he trained in firing guns. He knew that when guns were developed after meeting with Smith, they would become valuable weapons. After that, Wujin sat down to melt away Tsukimi's spiritual stone. He held on the mirror of heaven to keep himself calm. Alfonso, the leader of the Hunters Guild, was the busiest person in the world right now. It took Behyung a full 2 weeks to meet him. The day of the meeting was tomorrow. Wujin packed up his belongings and left. Mayo was waiting for him at the entrance. She still had 6 tails, but she was different. Long time no see. It hasn't even been a month yet. What's with that ring? Mayo then flashed the ring on her finger and smiled. Mother gave it to me. Wujin remembered what it was. Mayo had the ring after she got the 9th tail. It increased her spiritual power and power as a Gmeo. That alone made Mayo powerful enough. How far did you recover your orb? Almost. Good. Gmeos raised their orbs for their entire lives. It was as important as increasing their tails, but recovering orbs was very hard. It's thanks to the ring. That's good. You owe your mother. Yeah. Mayo smiled and Wujin also smiled. She was now one of those people he had to value. Let's go. Wujin walked and Mayo walked beside him. They went to Behyung's office where people were drinking. Are we in an office? Wujin asked and Ryota came up to him with a hiccup. Oh, Wujin. Wujin grabbed Ryota's shoulder and had him sit down. Dr. An and Brunhilde were here too, along with Behyung, Kimbom, and Young. Wujin looked at all of them and asked, "Don't tell me you guys have been doing this every day while I've been gone." Behyung answered, Ryota came yesterday after finishing his place and Dr. An came 2 days ago when the mobile lab was finished. And you? I drank every day after you left. Wujin sat down and Bum gave him a bowl of rice wine. You're leaving tomorrow? Bum smiled. I want to fight with you, but brother wants me to handle the company, so, this is all I can do for you. Bum gave him a black card, an American Express black card, or a credit card without any limit. Wujin looked at Behyung and he shrugged. I told him to use the money however he liked and he prepared that first. Wujin took the card. Thanks. Yeah, let me know if you need anything else. Sure. Wujin nodded and Behyung raised a glass. Let's drink. Wujin cheered and drank. Behyung said, I purchased a defense contractor company. You are the CEO but I didn't touch anything else. We'll start running it after we meet with Smith. Oh, did you get a call from Japan? A Mikami told me she'll send Bakami shells over soon. They will come tomorrow. Send it to the company when it arrives. Dr. N, we'll have the merman blood soon. I am looking into the sand of Sandman. Please make a formula to create the bullets. That's easy. Wujin then turned to Behyung. Can we hire Dr. An in the company? It's your company. That's up to you. Wujin then turned to Dr. An. You just need to make bullets and you will not need to worry about the money. Good. I will finish it before you come back. Introduce him to people you know. He'll need new equipment. Yeah. Don't worry. Thanks. New York's Central Park. Wujin, Behyung, and Mayo were jogging along in Central Park. Alfonso wanted to meet with us here. He complained so much that he doesn't have time. That's why we needed to meet him so early in the morning. They flew for a long time but it didn't feel tiring. Wujin then saw groups of people jogging up in front. Muscular men and 2 men were running front. There was a middle-aged man and a man with tan skin. Wujin said, there they are. Let's speed up then. They sped up and quickly caught up to the middle-aged man. The muscular men were alarmed but the middle-aged man smiled. Let them come. Behyung then ran up and began running next to the middle-aged man. You're busy. Yeah, it's what I do. The Hunters Guild had become very famous after the Day of Chaos. With monsters running rampant all around, Hunters had to show themselves in the world to start hunting down the monsters. Alfonso became busy also. I would not have taken this job if I'd known it would be this busy. Don't lie. Alfonso then slowed down and took a seat on a bench. The muscular men spread themselves out to stand guard. Wu Jin was interested in the tan-skinned man. Mayo looked at him and said, "He's an avatar." Wu Jin knew he was an avatar. There were a few Native American avatars that helped the Hunters Guild. The representative avatar of the United States was a Native American, so that seemed to be why, but Wu Jin didn't remember who this man was. Alfonso and Bahung were almost finished with their discussion. "I've invested a lot in Dr. N. I can't just let him go. I'll give you all the profit from the cocktails." Bahung tried to make a deal and Alfonso wiped his sweat. "Can you make a contract for it?" Bahung took out the contract. He had already prepared it with the condition. Alfonso smiled. He was eating money like a pig. "This is good. Thanks." Bahung got up and Alfonso asked, "I heard you are going to meet with Smith. How did you know that?" "This is the United States. I have ears everywhere. Don't mind me." Alfonso got up and said, "I can give you Dr. N, but not Smith. In a free country, isn't it up to him? I'm telling you not to force him to join you. You know me." Bahung then walked up to Alfonso. "Alfonso." He looked down and smiled. "Have you lost your mind? Don't forget who you are talking to." Alfonso swallowed and the Native American man intervened. Bahung scanned him from top to bottom. "Go tell Blue Wolf Howl that if Alfonso is important, send someone more powerful than you." The man frowned but he couldn't do anything. Bahung was one thing, but the ones that came with him also seemed to be very strong. His spiritual sensing instinct made him stay down. Bahung then turned back to Alfonso. "Then go on with your jogging, if you want to live long, that is." Alfonso sighed after he saw Bahung and the others running away. It felt like his heart had shrunk when Bahung got up close to him. "What do you think? Other than the woman, I have no chance." "I see." Alfonso clenched the towel. "I hope they don't create a mess." Chapter 88. How did it go? It was okay, but he was concerned about us meeting with Smith. "Doesn't matter. It's not like we are going to take Smith with us." "Yeah." Bahung got into the driver's seat. "So, who was the avatar protecting Alfonso?" "I think he's an avatar of the hawk spirit or something. I don't remember every weakling." Wu Jin then remembered a name. "Black Hawk of the Sky." He might seem like nothing but he became renowned after the incident happened at the Washington Memorial 5 years from now. He died when that happened, along with many other avatars. But it might not happen this time. Wu Jin asked Bahung, "When are we meeting with Smith?" "Tomorrow. We have to go to Chicago." "Are we going to rest in Chicago?" "Yeah, let's go." As they reached a lab located in the outer area of Chicago, Wu Jin realized that he now was in a very different position. In the past, he only used their weapons and never came here. He had never even met Smith back then. He had to persuade Smith to give him information about the weapons that they would be using in the future and ask him to join. The car moved in through the gates and Bahung noted, "Security is heavy." There were various machines and armed personnel guarding the area, but was this safe enough? Wu Jin could charge in if he wanted to. He couldn't sneak in, but he was powerful enough to barge in and take out Smith if he wanted to. The car pulled up to the lab and stopped. Armed personnel came over and checked with Bahung before they backed off. Wu Jin got out of the car. As they walked in, there were metal detectors at the entrance. Bahung walked in and when Wu Jin walked in, the alarm rang. It was obvious as he had Kusanagi no Ken and the Desert Eagle with him. The hunters looked at him and Bahung sneered. "You want a divine object to be left alone? Can you even protect it?" The hunters then made a call. The value of a divine object was more than what they could imagine, and it wasn't a good idea to quarrel with avatars. "You may go." Wu Jin passed and so did Mayo. They all went in and there was security everywhere. While going up the elevator, it suddenly stopped and the lights went out. Wu Jin asked the woman hunter who was also on the elevator, "What's going on?" "I think we lost power. The emergency generator will give us power soon." "Does this happen often?" "Sometimes. We use a lot of power here." And that's when they heard gunshots. "I don't think this is just a power outage." Wu Jin turned to Bahung who sighed. Why is this happening the day we come here? Woojin was actually more shocked that Blacksmith Lab was being attacked. It was never attacked as far as he remembered. He took out his sword and said, "Let's get the priority. Save Smith." Woojin nodded. They had to save Smith first. Woojin turned to the hunter. "Can you tell us where Smith's office is?" "I'll go with you." The woman took out a .44 Magnum and Woojin nodded. "Then let's go together." "I am Ko Woojin." "I am Marissa." "Let's go." Woojin swung his sword and the roof of the elevator was cut open. Woojin turned to Bahyung and he grabbed Marissa's waist. Woojin jumped up and swung his sword at the elevator door. The door was slashed open and Woojin looked down the corridor that lit up after receiving power from the emergency generator. The gunshots were more apparent. Woojin began walking forward and Mayo came up, followed by Bahyung and Marissa. Marissa frowned. "Mr. Smith is on the 7th floor. Let's go." The gunfire was dying out. It didn't seem like a good sign. Woojin quickly ran for the stairs and when he opened the door to the emergency staircase, something jumped out. He sensed it even before he opened the door, so he swung his sword without hesitation. Woojin frowned. Chupacabra? It was a bipedal blood-sucking monster and had a face that was half wolf and half hyena. Woojin then turned back. "I think we have more than one." The Chupacabra was an annoying monster, but it wasn't that strong if a hunter was well equipped and trained. If all those hunters weren't enough to defend against the Chupacabras, then there were only two reasons: either too many of them attacked, or they were being led by a powerful avatar or demon. Whatever the case was, they had to save Smith. "Bahyung, can you block them from coming up?" "Sure." Bahyung snapped and Dokkaebi fire appeared. The fierce fire swept through Chupacabras running up the stairs. Woojin turned to Marissa. "Follow me. I'll open the way up to the 7th floor." "Okay." Marissa was surprised by Bahyung's power. Such power was terrifying even if she knew the one using it was friendly. Marissa glanced at Bahyung and followed Woojin. She then saw Woojin slicing the Chupacabras in one swift movement. Hunters learned sword skills, but they weren't that powerful. Marissa then glanced back at the gunfire sounds. Mayo was running up while pulling the trigger to help Woojin. Marissa thought maybe these people would help them survive today. They smashed the door on the 7th floor and saw bodies of hunters in the surroundings. Woojin asked, "Where's his office?" "It's the room at the end." The walls had strange traces on them. It seemed like it was the avatar that killed the hunters. There were no other bodies than the hunters. Woojin turned and Mayo placed her hand on the wall. "Black man." He started a fire from his hand. "And what is this?" The weapon changes shape. It changes to a shield, to a spear, and to a sword. Woojin didn't remember seeing such a weapon before. But he didn't know about all the avatars anyway. He must be an avatar. "Yeah, how many are they?" "There are two. One didn't fight." Woojin sighed and looked at Marissa. "If we're up against avatars, I can't protect you. Can you come up with Bahyung?" "I will do that." Woojin then reached to Smith's office. When he was close, he saw something poking out from the door toward him. He swung his sword and realized that it was an iron spear. He realized enemy was ready for him from the inside, so he burst into the room. The spear was thrown again, but Woojin easily deflected it. Smith was pale from the terror. He turned and saw a black man who was over 2 meters tall. "Are you Ko Woojin? You know me? You are famous." The black man summoned another spear again. "My name is Ogun. I am the avatar of the god of fire and iron." Woojin then turned to the scrawny man. "Who are you?" Ogun frowned and the man answered, "Dekravia." "Oh?" Dekravia was one of the 72 demons. Reading his memory might give the Momwan's location. Ogun frowned and charged at Woojin. He pulled out his desert eagle and pulled the trigger. Ogun's spear then changed its shape to a shield and Woojin swung his sword. Ogun brought his shield up, but it was sliced through easily, also cutting his arm. Ogun jumped back to dodge and Woojin summoned Guybulg and threw it at Dekravia. Dekravia jumped to dodge and Woojin shouted, "Mayo." Mayo was already next to Smith. She snatched Smith and Dekravia summoned a swallow to make it fly toward her. It penetrated her chest and Dekravia smiled. "What are you smiling at?" Dekravia turned to Woojin and saw Mayo standing behind him. He quickly turned back and saw the Mayo who had been penetrated by swallow turning into a cloud of smoke. Mayo teased, "Fooled you." Chapter 89, Smith. 2. Smith was shocked. He never imagined his lab would be infiltrated so easily. So many enemies came from the sky. He wasn't sure how the chupacabras flew in when they didn't even have wings. But they broke through all defenses and broke in. The hunter teams were wiped out and his door was destroyed. He had hired more guards than usual since he wanted to show the Korean avatar of what he was capable of. But it was no use. He thought hunters and the equipment were enough to defend themselves against avatars, but they were utterly powerless against 2 avatars. Smith thought he would be safe even if they were going to kidnap him. However, the avatars he met didn't even consider him as a human. That's when Ogun threw a spear through the door. Soon, a man and woman charged in, bursting through the door, and he was saved. Smith sighed in relief and the man with the sword spoke. I am Ko Woo-jin. Let's introduce ourselves later. Shouldn't we run? I heard Baehyung is here. These 2 looked like avatars. It seemed like having Baehyung was going to ensure his safety. He's coming up. It's more dangerous to move around and get caught by the chupacabras. Smith looked at Woo-jin. There was some weight in his voice. Mayo, can you look after him? Yeah. Woo-jin then walked out and Smith looked back. He knew how reckless it might be to fight 2 avatars at once, but he couldn't tell Mayo to go help. His life was in danger for the first time. Woo-jin became more relaxed now that he had saved Smith, Ogun and Decravia. Ogun wasn't easy as he controlled fire and iron. Decravia had power over birds. It was easy to see how he ordered the chupacabras to fly into the building. Woo-jin reached out and Guy Bulg returned to him. Letting Guy Bulg out made his bones weak. He had metal-like muscles but he needed Guy Bulg to withstand extreme damage. Woo-jin then turned to them. Ogun made a shield and Decravia stood behind him to summon frigate birds. Frigate birds could fly at speeds of 400 km per hour normally, and these were summoned with spiritual power. Therefore, these birds probably had more power. Ogun charged. He made a sword in his hand and wielded fire over it. Woo-jin then charged against him as he got closer. He swung his sword and the sword crushed Ogun's fire sword. Ogun then created dagger on his left to swing it and Woo-jin grabbed it with his bare hand. Ogun tried to cut his fingers but the dagger didn't budge as if it was stuck. Woo-jin then realized that this wasn't a divine object. It was his power. If it was his power, it wasn't going to be difficult to deal with. Ogun summoned fire but Woo-jin struck Ogun's chin with his sword's hilt and took out Guy Bulg to thrust it into Ogun's chest. That's when a frigate bird flew toward his eyes and Woo-jin became distracted. Ogun then made a large explosion. Ogun hopped back and Woo-jin cut the bird in half. It was so fast that it made his hand buzz. The half-sliced bird flew and stuck the wall. Woo-jin charged at Ogun as he had to capture Decravia alive, so he had to kill him first. Ogun threw the fire-wielding spear and Woo-jin deflected it by covering himself with spiritual power. The cloak absorbed it and changed its shape. As Woo-jin got closer, another explosion was unleashed but Woo-jin was prepared this time. He kicked in, thanks to the phoenix feather shoes. The kick made a hole in the explosion and Woo-jin jumped in. Ogun frowned and quickly created a sword in his right hand and a shield in his left hand. Woo-jin swung his sword while wielding spiritual power and Ogun tried to deflect it by using his shield. However, Woo-jin's strength was too powerful and the shield was cut in half, along with Ogun's wrist. Ogun jumped back and Woo-jin was overwhelmed by a large number of crows. He swung his sword to cut them down, but that wasn't enough. The number of crows was increasing and Ogun and Decravia moved back toward the window. We'll see each other again. Decravia then jumped out and got up on his summoned albatross. The monster-sized albatross began to fly up and Ogun held his wrist while throwing flames at him. Woo-jin dodged and jumped out of the window. Ogun scoffed but Woo-jin stepped in the air and followed them. His immediate speed was faster than the albatross. Ogun fired an explosion to push the albatross further but Woo-jin dropped from above Ogun's head. Woo-jin had jumped over the explosion by jumping up high with his shoes in the air. Ogun quickly formed the shield to defend against it but the shield was destroyed and made albatross fall down to the ground and it died. Woo-jin then kicked the air toward Ogun and dropped down. He was going to kill all the avatars that sided with Amwon whenever he got a chance. Ogun gritted his teeth and started a fire in his right hand. The fire made by burning his own spiritual stone had power unlike before. Wu Jin then brought his left fist back. He couldn't use this against a foe that was using his own spiritual stone to fight back. Wu Jin's fist grew larger and he threw it down. It was so powerful that it created a crater on the ground as they dropped. The shock even made destroyed part of the building. Wu Jin got up. He had used all of his spiritual power, but he still could move. It was probably due to Tsukimi's spiritual stone. Wu Jin looked down at Ogun, who was dead with all of his bones shattered. Dekravia was already running away. You can't just flee. He had to capture Dekravia. Wu Jin pulled out Guy Bulg and threw it with all of his might. He had trained hard to make it hit its target. Guy Bulg fired like lightning and Dekravia summoned more crows. But crows weren't enough and Guy Bulg burst through. And when it got to Dekravia, he reached out with his hand and a transparent gem appeared, spreading the light like a shield. It destroyed the shield and stopped Guy Bulg. Wu Jin was too far away to move it with his will, so all he could do was bring it back. I will get you next time. Wu Jin then called Guy Bulg back and sat down to recover his spiritual power. Bihung then came over. Is this Ogun? You know him? I heard he's a strong one from Africa, but he's dead. Wu Jin then said, I hope he knows something at least. About what? About Amon. Chapter 90. Joined Forces. 1. Dekravia spat annoyingly as he talked to Amon on the screen. I almost died because of your request. Wu Jin appeared there. Yeah, you were with Ogun. You couldn't get him? Get him? I barely got away. Yeah. Well, you are not a battle type. Dekravia frowned, but he wasn't wrong. What are you going to do? We will make him regret that he appeared. Are you going to help? Let's put an end to him this time. Dekravia smiled. He was glad that he would get a chance to get revenge against Wu Jin. The lab was in bad shape, except for the hunters that stood guard outside and Marissa. All the other hunters in the building were killed. There was a total of 327 chupacabra bodies strewn all over the place. Smith was interviewed shortly with the news and then he returned to the room. He drank water and sighed. It was raining heavily outside and hunters and police were collecting bodies. Bihung took Ogun's body. Smith wanted to study it so he could make weapons that worked against them, but he couldn't refuse their request. He sighed when the phone rang. It was Alfonso. I heard what happened. Are you okay? I am okay. That's good to hear. It would have been a disaster if Bihung didn't go to you. Smith didn't answer and Alfonso quickly continued. I will ask Blue Wolf Howl to send over an avatar to protect you. You need their protection. Smith smiled bitterly. He never thought he would need protection from avatars. He thought advanced technology could protect him instead. But that trust had been shattered. He was shocked by Ogun and Dekravia, but Wu Jin was much more than that. Would his advanced technology work against them? He shook his head. The world of avatars was much more than what he imagined. He had to start from scratch to study avatars and make weapons that might work against them. He then left the room and went to Wu Jin's room. Inside, Wu Jin and Bihung sitting on the sofa. Ogun's body was placed down in a corner of the room and Maya was closing her eyes next to Ogun's body. Are you done with the interview? Wu Jin asked. Smith nodded. Yes. Smith exchanged a handshake with Wu Jin. We finally get to talk. Have a seat. He wasn't the same terrified man from a while ago. He was now the founder of the blacksmith industry. The reason why he started the business was because his family was killed by monsters. Hunters appeared out of nowhere to save him, but they didn't have the appropriate weapons. So many of them died while killing those monsters. That's when he wanted to create weapons to help hunters to fight these monsters. Smith looked at Wu Jin and bowed. Thank you for saving my life. We were lucky. He couldn't have saved Smith if the enemies had come a day earlier. Smith smiled and turned to Bihung. So, can I hear why you have come for me? Bihung then turned to Wu Jin. He wanted to see you. That's why we're here. Smith turned back to Wu Jin. We're here to ask for a deal and a share of the technology. But I see that it is not the right time to discuss that. No, it is exactly the right time. Everyone turned to him and Smith explained. No need to make a deal. Please allow me to join you. Wu Jin turned to Bihung, asking if he knew anything about that. Bihung shrugged and Smith added. I realize that my technology does not work against avatars. Please, let me study avatars and I will join your cause. Wu Jin thought for a second. Having Smith on the team would be great. but he wasn't sure if he should make such a decision. Can't you study avatars without joining them? Woojin, however, knew that studying avatars was no easy task. Even Dr. An couldn't get to study them until Woojin killed Wuma. It seemed like you knew those who wanted to kidnap me, Smith said. The one that came here was Dekravia, one of 72 demons. From what I can see, they are related to Amon. Is he one of the demons? Yes, Smith then asked. Are you opposing them? Yes, but I don't think what happened today is related to us. Smith then shook his head. No, I'm not saying that they came here for you. What I mean is, he looked into Woojin's eyes, if I join you, will I be fighting Amon? Yes, that is true, Woojin answered, and Smith smiled in response. Yes, that's why I want to join you. Woojin turned to Behyung for help. Your call. Didn't you say you need his help? Yeah, but Woojin knew that siding with Smith might make it dangerous for the man, but if he teamed up with Dr. N, Brunhilde would protect him also, and they would create a powerful weapon, especially when Dr. N had become an avatar. And what's important was that Smith was rich. It's not easy, but we cannot give you a salary. I don't need a salary. Do you know how many hunters and researchers died here today? They were my family. Woojin then didn't stop him anymore. He held his hand out. Welcome. Smith went to pack his things, and Woojin was able to hear from Mayo on what she read. Ogun never met Amon directly. He met with a vampire and worked under the condition that his country will be supported. He turned, along with Shango. Shango, Behyung sighed, and Woojin's question. You should study a bit. Shango is a god of thunder. Elemental gods were hard to deal with as they became more powerful if they had divine objects that suited them. Did you see anything else? They have a monster farm. They have people trapped there to raise chupacabras. Woojin frowned. He remembered Amon having monster farms, but that was after the Day of Chaos happened. He didn't think it was already in effect. Who's in charge of it? It's Dekravia. Where is it? It's in an abandoned hospital just outside Chicago. Woojin turned to Behyung. I'll get the car ready. Are we going now? We should get them before they run. Good. Behyung went out, and Woojin turned to Mayo. Are you okay? Yeah, I think him being dead made it easier, but I didn't realize there were those who might side with demons for such a reason. There were a lot of avatars who sided with demons for their own reasons, but that was how the world reached its end. They were avatars who let others die for their own people. They had to live by their decisions. Woojin placed his hand on Mayo's shoulder. Even if they had a noble intention, what awaits them, in the end, is destruction. Don't mind them. Mayo laughed. I don't mind. I am busy taking care of my own. Behyung then came in. We're ready. Let's go. Woojin turned to Mayo and confidently said, let's get to Dekravia. Chapter 91, Joined Forces. 2. Smith volunteered to go with them as he didn't want to stay behind alone. Woojin thought for a second. He had to protect the man anyway and decided it was better to take him along. Woojin asked Mayo to look after him and run away with him if the situation became dangerous. They soon reached the abandoned hospital after driving for an hour. Woojin asked, do you feel anything? Behyung crossed his arms and answered, nothing. Nothing? I'm not good at sensing things, you know. But we can't even hear a sound. Mayo looked at the hospital and asked, should I go check it out? No. She had become fast due to the starfish fang, but she was still the weakest. It was better for Woojin and Behyung to go check it out themselves. Behyung, let's go take a look. Yeah. They got out of the car and walked toward the building. On their way in, Woojin spotted a security camera and turned to Behyung. Let's start then. He snapped his fingers and the camera exploded. Woojin then jumped over the wall and ran. Behyung followed closely behind. You've gotten faster. Woojin was almost quick as vampires now. He was faster than any vampires unless it was against the first generation. When they were at the main gate, Woojin rammed it in with his shoulder. There were no signs of people inside the hospital. I'll go up. Behyung, check below. Good. Call me if you see anything. Yeah. Woojin then ran up. He couldn't sense spiritual power, but his 5 senses were heightened. Yet, he couldn't hear anything until he reached the roof. He saw blue fire rising from the basement. Ugh. I told you to call me," and that's when his phone rang. It was Bahyung. "I think they were raising a second herd of monsters. There are a lot of Bigfoots. Is Dekravia there? Number. I don't see him. I'll check up here for a bit. Do you need help? Hey, I'm Bahyung. Remember?" Woojin hung up and there was another call from Mayo. The roof. Woojin then did not hesitate as he took his sword out and jumped. He smashed through the ceiling and got to the roof. He saw Dekravia running away on an albatross. Woojin couldn't fly back then because had he used the Fist of Giant, but he had other ways of flying. His cloak turned into wings and Woojin flew. However, he frowned because was too slow. He then recalled his wings and jumped in the air. With a large leap, he closed their distance. Dekravia created a pack of crows but Woojin swung his sword to kill them. It allowed Dekravia to run away and now frigate birds were flying at him. Woojin swung and fired his Desert Eagle. Dekravia created a gem shield to defend against it. He was getting further away. Woojin then grabbed the bamboo spear. He had to get him before he could get away. He threw it and Dekravia brought up the shield again, the diamond shield. It was very hard but the bamboo spear pierced through it. If Dekravia moved quickly, his heart would have been penetrated. Dekravia sent 5 more frigate birds and escaped while Woojin killed the birds and dropped to the ground. He smiled as he saw Dekravia running away on the bird. There was blood dripping onto the ground. Woojin called Bahyung and Mayo at the same time. "There's a lot left here. Did you get him? Number. I lost him. Damn it. I should have gone up." Woojin then saw the cloak sucking the blood on the ground and said, "But he's hurt. He is bleeding so I'll track him down. Doesn't he fly though? Should I join you?" Woojin began tracking him before he got too far. He picked up the spear on the way and began to run. "Meet up with Bahyung and follow me. Trace my phone's location. I'll be with you soon. Hang in there." Woojin then jumped up on top of the building. The building was high, but it wasn't too high as they were not in the city. The wound was on the left chest. There was no way to cut it out and the constant bleeding was going to make him exhausted. Woojin didn't need to hurry. He couldn't see Dekravia in sight anymore, but the cloak quickly went for the blood to suck more. After sucking a lot of blood, the cloak now showed what it wanted to Woojin. It made it easy for Woojin to track him down. Dekravia panted. His wound kept bleeding and it didn't heal. "Damn it," he called Amon. "When am I getting those reinforcements?" "On the way." "What happened?" "The farm is bust, and my wound is not healing." "You got hit by the spear?" "Yeah, I'll tell Toil to join with you." "Go to the water tower." "Okay." Dekravia then turned toward the water tower. Damn it, the wound was too severe for him to survive at this rate. He stuffed his gems in so it would slow down the bleeding at least a little bit. "I'll kill you." Chicago was in the distance, and the water tower was just around the corner. Chapter 92, Chase 1. Bahyung drove and Mayo sat shotgun. She spoke as she looked at her smartphone. "They are fighting at the water tower. It's in the news." The news showed that the water tower had been destroyed into 2 and a lot of people died as buildings collapsed. "The police and firemen there, but they're still fighting." Bahyung frowned. "We have a fire user then." "Yeah, the power seems like it's not just any fire avatar though." "So what should we do now?" With the tower destroyed, the traffic was congested and blocked. They couldn't follow Woojin in time this way. The one that Woojin was chasing flew across the sky so the one used fire was a different one. It meant Woojin was fighting against 2 avatars. He had to go help. Bahyung said to Mayo, "I'll go." "Do you want me to go?" "Number. Take care of Smith." "I will." Bahyung then began to run. He was slower than Woojin or Mayo, but he was still much quicker than any average human. He saw the water tower in flames. Who are these idiots doing that kind of thing in public? Monsters had no control over what they did, but avatars were different. It was foolish for avatars to cause such problems in public. What has the world come down to? Bahyung frowned as he ran. Woojin tried to move away from the flame but Toil made it explode everywhere. The fire raged all over, but his cloak protected his starfish fang. Yet, he couldn't get close to Toil. The water tower was destroyed and Dekravia was also attacking from behind. They both were ranged attackers and they didn't allow Woojin to come close. Woojin knew Bahyung was going to come soon and since he didn't have to worry about the starfish fang, It was time to settle things. Wujin charged and Toil unleashed some flames in his direction. Wujin swung his sword with spiritual power and charged in. He swung and Toil swung his gem sword. The swords clashed and Wujin threw his fist out. Wujin's skin changed into turtle shell form, meaning that the enemy's fist was that powerful. Toil then began throwing fists from close range so that Wujin couldn't use his sword. As they began fighting in close range, Decravia couldn't target Wujin. Wujin's fist was powerful enough to crush the enemy, but Toil wouldn't fall so easily. Toil then opened his mouth and fire came out. Wujin kicked and jumped back. His feather shoes allowed him to back off quickly, but Toil sent flames out again. Wujin tried to swing his sword when a blue flame clashed with the red flame. Wujin then jumped further back and brought out the spear to throw it. Toil dodged it, but Decravia couldn't. His shoulder was penetrated again and Wujin dashed toward Toil, who threw a flame in response. But this time, a strong wind blew and pushed his flame. Wujin rammed into his chest and got closer to Decravia. What he wanted was Decravia because he summoned crows, but Wujin threw his spear at the crows. After the spear made an opening through the crows, Wujin summoned his Guybulg and hurled it also. Decravia, who just barely dodged the previous spear, saw Guybulg flying at him and he tried to dodge, but Wujin smiled. He had control over its movement in such short distance. Guybulg turned direction and stabbed Decravia's leg. The spear had spread through his leg and Decravia chopped his leg off. As he threw himself to get away with one leg, Wujin took out the mirror of heavens. The light shined upon Decravia. Arg! He screamed and Wujin got to him to crush his remaining leg. Wujin then smashed Decravia's chin to stop him from screaming and turned. Toil and Bihung were fighting. Toil had powerful muscle strength, but Bihung was also powerful. Bihung dropped Toil down to the ground and pinned him. You did most of the work here. Boring. Toil had wounds after being punched by Wujin. Bihung wondered, where did they find this avatar from a fallen civilization? Fallen civilization? He's an avatar from the Mayan civilization. Wujin looked at Toil. Why was such an avatar siding with Amon? Wujin stepped on Decravia's chest and declared, I finally got you. Decravia then smiled coldly. His quick regeneration got him to talk again. You want information from me now? Wujin then said, oh, sorry. Actually, I don't need you alive. What? Wujin swung his sword and decapitated. He spoke while looking at Decravia's widened eyes. I will need information though. He then turned to Bihung. What should we do with him? Most avatars of fallen civilizations are psychos. We can't let him live. Did Toil read what Wujin and Bihung were going to do? His body began to glow red and Wujin quickly swung his sword to cut off his head too. Toil's head had been cut, but his tattoo turned red and Bihung jumped out the window and shouted, run. Wujin also grabbed Decravia and followed. A powerful explosion occurred as they jumped out of the building. Bihung quickly used his iron fan to start the gust that made the explosion rise up into the air. It was so powerful that it penetrated through the dense clouds and showed the clear sky above it. Bihung looked at Wujin with an exhausted look. Shinetsu did this so effortlessly, but I can't. Wujin helped Bihung and frowned as people screamed at them. I'll see you later. Yeah. Came to the hotel. Yeah. Wujin then took the spiritual stone from Decravia's body and put him on his back. The cloak then moved over the body and Wujin ran out. He couldn't have people be afraid of avatars too. After arriving at the hotel, Wujin placed Decravia's body down and fed the starfish fang with the spiritual stone. He felt his spiritual power increasing by a large margin. As he checked on his increased spiritual power, Mayo, Smith, and Bihung came into the room. Smith was shocked by Decravia's mummified body. Wujin smiled. You will see many like this from now on. All of its blood was sucked out, but it'll still be somewhat useful. Smith looked at the body. Can I study it then? Yeah, but let me read his memory first. Wujin looked at Mayo. She took out the orb and placed it in her mouth. Be careful, Demons are powerful beings. I have the ring now, it should be okay. Yeah. Mayo placed her hand on Woojin's head and another hand on Decravia and began to flash the memory. Woojin saw the fight and went back to when Decravia was raising monsters by using humans. It angered him to see these demon bastards. The memory turned further back. Wait. Woojin turned and saw that Mayo's nose had begun to bleed. I can read it, but I won't be able to do it for too long. No, it's okay. We'll start reading it from here later. Yeah. Okay. Woojin then gave Decravia's body to Smith. I just need the head, so you can take this to study it. We have a mobile lab, let's take it there. Smith took Decravia while Woojin picked up the head and said, this will lead us to Amon. Chapter 93, Chase. 2. It took 5 days to read Decravia's memory. Mayo read the memory whenever she recovered from the exhaustion. Decravia never met Amon physically. But one thing was certain, there were no ranks that divided the demons. They were working together toward Amon's big plan while doing what they each sought for themselves. They all had different plans, so they worked on their own, but they all talked to Amon for one thing, information about Woojin. Therefore, they were able to figure out one piece of information, Amon's phone number. After they read through Decravia's memory completely, Mayo fell asleep while gaining another tail and Woojin checked the phone number. Having the phone number didn't mean that he could change his plans, but it still was a direct phone number to reach Amon, so he decided to use it. Woojin decided to call Amon and use the call to track him down. He had to be prepared beforehand, so he decided to return to Korea. Smith then told him that he needed more time to move his research equipment and Woojin told Baehyung to wait until Smith was ready to get him back safely. Woojin returned to Mayo. She was still asleep to create her seventh tail. She woke up earlier before, but it was taking more time now. It had been a full day but she was still sleeping. Woojin sat next to her and looked down at her. Her ring allowed her to be much stronger as she could now make a shadow copy of herself even though she only had 6 tails. Woojin looked at Mayo. The Gmeo family was born beautiful and they became more beautiful as they acquired more tails. That's why Woojin tried to not get too close to her. He thought that if he felt some kind of feeling toward her, it was due to her power. Woojin saw a strand of hair across her face and he used his finger to push it back. He then shook his head. That made his heart pound, which meant that her power was increasing. That's when Mayo opened her eyes slowly. She smiled brightly when she saw Woojin. You've been looking after me? Number. I just got here. Mayo got up slowly. She was calmer than before and Woojin glanced behind her. There were 7 tails. It was always refreshing to see her growing in power as Woojin only saw her with 9 tails in the past. Woojin got up and briefed her. We will use the phone number to track down Amon's location. Let's go meet Ryota. Were you waiting for me? I almost called Ryota to come here because you weren't waking up. Mayo got up quickly and grabbed Woojin's arm. Woojin turned to her with a frown but she smiled and said, let's go together. Are we grouping up? Yeah, we can go straight to the airport. Okay, let's go. It seemed like Mayo wasn't listening, but the feeling of her skin on his arm was good. And he liked her smell too. Even if all of this was because of her power, he felt like it was okay to enjoy it now. Woojin and Mayo met up with the others. Mayo let people know of her 7th tail and everyone congratulated her. Woojin looked at the people and missed those who were left in Korea. He now had the core members he needed to fight Amon. He needed hunters too but that required Smith to create weapons for them. Smith walked over to Woojin. I checked Decravia's body but it doesn't show anything special. That kind of body is vulnerable to our current firearms. Demons without spiritual power were just humans with high physical traits. But with the spiritual power and their unique power, it was impossible to hurt them with regular weapons. It will be different with spiritual power. We need weapons that work in that situation. I understand. They needed weapons that would allow hunters to fight against avatars. Bullets made with Bakuni shells were effective against monsters, but they didn't work against avatars. Woojin said, I will wait for you in Korea. Sure. Woojin then walked up to Baehyung. Check with Bum to see if he's doing okay. Yeah, but I'm sure he's doing well. Baehyung tapped on Woojin's shoulder. I'll come right after I'm done here. Let's hope we can find Amon. Yeah, I hope so too. Woojin turned to Mayo. Let's go back to Korea. Dom was very busy in his office. Baehyung didn't pay much attention to details for the most part, but Dom didn't know a lot about the work and had to check every detail about the many spendings, and thus he was busier overall. Phew. Let's take a break. Dom then checked his phone and smiled. Woojin should be back soon. It was almost time for Woojin's jet to arrive. There had been a lot of incidents after the day of chaos, but this one was quite big. There had been over 200 civilians. It was also the death of hunters that made people's expectation of hunters go down. In the meantime, the media talked a lot about Baehyung who saved Smith. Baehyung's interview was posted and people became interested in beings called avatars. The reason for Baehyung's appearance in the media was because he wanted to hide the work of the demons. Dom then looked down at his wristwatch and became shocked. He had asked Dr. N to increase its power, and what appeared on the watch gave him the chills. What? He turned on the computer and launched a program. The spiritual power sensing system he installed in the company was sending warnings out. Dom quickly called up people. Hong, it's an emergency. Bring Dr. N and Ryota to the shelter. There were almost 50 caught by the sensors. All avatars. Why were avatars coming to attack this place at such a crazy speed? Dom moved to the elevator and started the fire alarm before he called Woojin. What's going on? It's an attack. Attack? At least 50. I have avatars coming in on my system. I'm moving to the shelter. How far are you? At least 2 hours. Hang in there. Be quick. Dom hung up and called people in the media room to tell people to evacuate the building. When he got to the underground shelter, Yoang, Dr. N, Brunhilde, and Ryota were already there. Yoang also had the cleaners with her. What's the status? Dom frowned. We have 50 at least. This is crazy. Get in. It's going to take Woojin at least 2 hours to get here, but I don't think Woojin will able to fight 50 avatars. Yeah. But we have no choice for now. Let's get in. They all walked in and the shelter door closed behind them. It was created after they helped create Ryota and Dr. N's offices in the building. However, they weren't sure how long it would hold out against attacks from avatars. Ryota sat down and said, "It's not completely ready yet, but I can use the building's system. Let's check." Ryota checked the screens and saw the enemies above the roof. Damn it, it's the vampires and war families. They were the ones with the most numbers, but they never moved in large groups like that. They had brought 5 helicopters and were getting off from the roof. Yoang asked, "Weren't we checking the airports?" "Yeah. But we can't get them if they snuck in." Yoang frowned. They had to protect themselves for at least 2 hours. Chapter 94. Rescue. 1. A woman jumped out of the helicopter on the roof. She tied her hair in a ponytail and wore a black military suit with battle boots. She also had bows and arrows on her. She looked around. On her left was Roy from the Werewolves and Yoan, a second-generation vampire. The woman, Rileka, said, "They will be hiding in the underground shelter. We need Dr. An Jong alive. Kill the rest." Rai and Yoan glanced at each other and ran. Screams came from areas they ran past, and Rileka took out an iPhone from her pocket and connected her earphones to it so she could listen to music. As she listened to Vivaldi, she took an arrow and readied on her bow. She then shot the arrow as she walked down the stairs, and the arrow pierced through the wall before returning to her quiver. She fired her arrow like that from time to time while walking down, and the arrows always came back with blood. Dom frowned as he looked at the massacre on the screen. He tried to evacuate the people, but there were still a lot of civilians left in the building. They were all dying. Unlike Baehyung, Dom remembered every employee's name who worked here. He remembered the names of those people being killed and clenched his fist so hard that it bled. Yoang grabbed his shoulder. "No. Do you want me to just sit here and watch? We have no choice. We cannot protect Dr. An or Ryota if we go out." "I know." Dom gritted his teeth and saw a sudden arrow coming out of nowhere and killing a person. The arrow then returned through the wall and Dom said, "Ryota, the arrow. Where did it come from?" "Wait." Ryota then turned the screen. "It's her." She was walking down the stairs while firing her arrows. Who the hell is she? Brunhilde then looked at her through the screen. I know who she is, Releka. She's one of the 72 demons. She then looked at the others and pointed another one out. And him. That's the leader of the blue werewolves. Right, blue werewolves? Aren't they the group with the most numbers? There's 14 werewolves and 36 vampires. I don't know how long the gate will hold. Brunhilde sat down next to Dr. Anne and he grabbed Brunhilde's hand. Don't worry, I'll protect you. I should have worked harder to research divine objects. You can't create that in 1 or 2 days. I know. Dom then checked his watch. Damn it, only 10 minutes have passed. They still had 2 hours left but enemies were already coming through the basement. I hope the door lasts. It took 20 minutes to kill all the civilians in the building. Releka arrived at the basement and looked at Rai. His nail grew and he sent spiritual power into his nail. He then swung it at the door of the shelter. It left a scratch but the door did not budge. Rai scoffed. It's quite thick. His claws shined brightly with more spiritual power and Rai clawed the door again. Even if it was thick, there was no way it could hold on for too long. Part of the door broke and revealed the inside but something shot out and stabbed Rai's chest. Ugh! Rai backed away. It was the leg of a chair. He was infuriated that he had been attacked, but the pain was too extreme. Yoan then got up and threw a grenade into the hole. There was an explosion but it seemed too small. Then blue fire came out through the hole and Releka shot her arrows. She said as she fired at the Dokkaebi fire, "Pull the door out." Rai ordered his werewolves and they all went to the door to push it back. Soon, the door was pulled out and Releka shouted, "Get the doctor." Wujin got on the helicopter as soon as he got off the plane. "Let's go fast." He called Bum on the phone but he didn't answer. Yoang and Brunhilde didn't answer either. Wujin frowned and looked outside. Mayo said, "It's coming out in the news." They looked at the phone screen where reporters were gathered in front of the building. Wujin sighed. If Bum was okay, there was no way this would be in the news. When the helicopter reached the roof of the building, Wujin jumped. He landed powerfully and Mayo landed softly on the roof. They then ran down the staircase. When they got to the basement, there were many policemen and members from the government checking the area. They turned to Wujin and he asked, "Who's in charge here?" A middle-aged man came up and said, "I heard someone will be coming." Behyung told Wujin that he had talked to someone already. "Get the people out of the room." "How long do you need?" 10 minutes should be enough. The man then clapped and ordered people out. Wujin turned to Mayo. "Show me the memory of this place." "Hold on." Mayo then placed her hand over Wujin's forehead and read the memory of the floor. There were 50 avatars comprised of vampires and werewolves. Releka was leading them. Wujin frowned as he knew the power of her arrows. Dum and Yoang charged through the enemies. They threw down vampires and werewolves left and right but they couldn't get past Releka. Her arrow got Dum's thighs and Yoang's left arm was struck. They were almost successful in getting away. If Brunhilde hadn't gotten hit in the stomach, damn it. Wujin spat and saw Brunhilde telling them to run. Dum and Yoang ran away with their injuries. He then saw Dr. Anne blocking Brunhilde and agreeing to follow Releka. It was good that Bum and Yoang got away but the power behind Releka's arrows was that they rotted injuries, which was a concern. He had to save Bum and Yoang fast. Wujin then said, "We have to track Bum and Yoang. They can't even pick up their phones right now." "Okay." Mayo then concentrated on reading where they had fled and Wujin glanced around the place. "Wait, you're alive." There was a chair in the corner which was Ryota. He stuttered with teary eyes. I. Wujin went to him and grabbed his shoulders. "It's okay. It's good that you're safe." Wujin tapped his shoulder. "Dum and Hong got away. We need to find them." "Yeah, the werewolves are chasing after them. Maybe they might be faster than us." Mayo spoke with a smile. "So I get to use the new power I got. Do you trust me?" "Of course, get on my back." Mayo smiled. "I guess you know what the power is already this time too?" "Yeah. You're trying to read memories as we go along, right?" Then if you'll excuse me. Mayo then hopped onto Woojin's back and wrapped her arms around Woojin's neck. Ryota also stood up. I'll go with you. Yeah, but try to change into a watch or something. Ryota turned into a watch and Woojin placed him on his right wrist. Where should we go? Mayo's eyes turned red and she began her guidance. Let's go up. Woojin then ran in that direction. Mayo saw Bum and Hung getting into a car to run away. Woojin followed the lead and hoped for their safety. He unleashed spiritual power all over his body and ran as fast as he could. After 30 minutes of running, the car was thrown off the bridge outside Seoul and was destroyed. Woojin got down there and Mayo said, they fought here and ran to that place. Woojin, however, heard the sounds and moved forward. When he got there, 5 werewolves were circling Yoong, whose left arm had been cut off and she was protecting Bum. Woojin placed down Mayo and charged. Chapter 95, Rescue. 2. Woojin grabbed his gun and pulled the trigger. The gun was to draw their attention as he knew it wouldn't hurt the werewolves. Woojin jumped and fell between them and swung his Kusanagi no Ken. The speed and strength far outpowered that of the werewolves and Woojin sent spiritual power into his weapon. One of the werewolves' heads was cut down along with his claws and Woojin charged at another. They all turned to Woojin while one of them held his head up and howled. Before he could finish howling, Mayo's starfish fang had stabbed his neck. Mayo then twisted it back and cut off the head. While Mayo was taking care of one werewolf while Woojin took care of the rest, he slashed with his sword and thrust with his spears to kill all of them. Bum was pale as he was laying on the ground. He could barely get up with his arms. You were fast. Woojin grabbed Bum's hand. His leg had already been cut as it began to rot and he tried to stop the bleeding but it was still bleeding a little. Woojin then saw his cloak being tempted by the blood and pressed it. He became annoyed that it was reacting to Bum's blood. Even if it was its instincts, he couldn't let the cloak try to drink his friend's blood. However, the cloak shared Woojin's will. Woojin hesitated as he learned that it wasn't because of its instinct that cloak was moving and looked at Bum. Bum, do you trust me? Of course, why would I call you if I didn't? Woojin nodded and reached out. The cloak then began unfurling itself from Woojin's arm and his chest and went over to Bum's leg. Bum narrowed his eyes as the black thing changing into the shape of his leg. What is this? Cloak of Vampire Bat. I didn't know I could use it like this, but it got much better after drinking good blood recently. You can use it as your leg for now. Bum checked his leg and tried to move as if he still had it. The leg did move. Wow, I now have a black leg. Woojin also reached out for Yoong. The cloak then turned into her left arm while receiving some of her blood a bit. Yoong also flexed her newly acquired arm and nodded. It's good for now. The cloak was now only about shirt-sized but it was good that he helped Yoong and Bum for now. Woojin asked, are you okay? For now. Where are they taking Dr. N? Bum sighed. I don't know. Tell me what you remember. Bum then thought. Brunhilde had put up a good fight. She used the metal leg of a chair to kill 7 vampires and 3 werewolves. Bum and Yoong also killed 4 vampires and 4 werewolves but realized they had a better chance at running away. Releka attacked them on the way. They thought they were still lucky to only get shot before running. But they failed when Brunhilde was shot in the stomach while blocking Dr. N. She told them to run and Bum and Yoong ran away. They then felt their injuries rotting and it became harder to run. It was at the last moment that Woojin had arrived. I heard they wanted Dr. N alive. Woojin then realized what he had missed. Damn it, Ryota. Ryota then changed himself back and Woojin shouted, we need to track down a helicopter. We need our equipment first. Woojin nodded and looked at Bum and Yoong. Can you guys move? I'll need some time to run with this, but I can still move. Yeah, let's go together as they might send more to chase after us. Mayo, get us a car. Okay. Mayo moved out and Woojin took out the mirror. He wasn't sure if the infection had spread farther than the injury. Based on what he saw when his friend died before, Rileka's power made larger regions rot. Woojin then flashed the mirror at Bum's area of injury and Bum frowned. Arg. Woojin knew Bum wasn't affected by the mirror. What was being purified was Rileka's power. Woojin then moved up and the pain disappeared when the light from the mirror reached his stomach. It hurts. I think it's the pain when Rileka's power disappears. Woojin did the same thing on Yoong. She had the light move from her shoulder to her lungs when the pain disappeared. They looked much better and Woojin walked up to bodies of the werewolves. The cloak sucked up their blood and Woojin fed the stones to his starfish fang. He had hoped to increase his regeneration power since he couldn't have the cloak wrap around his entire body now. Mayo then came back with 2 taxis. They into the cars and returned to Seoul. Ryota took them the room they got for him. It was full of equipment and Ryota began typing on the computer. From what I can see on the security cameras, they used Premium Airlines helicopter. I'll have their location by tracking their tickets. Who owns that airline? Let me look. Ryota tapped on the keyboard and stated, it's owned by Ronson Peters from the UK. UK? Yeah, and it seems that the chopper has moved to their yacht. This is the yacht. It was really a huge yacht that had a helipad. Do you know where this yacht is? Yeah. Ryota then tapped on the keyboard a bit. Here. They are on the way to China. Good. Woojin turned and Bum called someone on his phone. I have a chopper ready. Are we going after them? Of course. It will take 5 minutes for the chopper to arrive. We have a person who knows the area. Woojin then turned to them and said, you two should rest. Leave this to me. Bum then looked at Woojin and tried moving his leg. It moved, but he couldn't fight. Yeah. Well, I'm a patient now. Thanks. I'll bring Dr. Ann back. Yeah, I told the chopper to land on the roof. Woojin got up and Mayo also got up, but Woojin shook his head. It's dangerous. Stay here. If you can't find Dr. Ann there, you'll need my help. Yoong also nodded. Yeah. Take her with you. I don't think she'll be your burden from what I saw a while ago. Mayo was really fast now. But was that enough to be safe in the middle of a group of enemies? Woojin looked at her and said, try not to join in the fight. Yoong then frowned. Woojin, don't be arrogant. You can't do everything alone. We have a demon and vampires and werewolves filling up the place, and you might be facing more when you get there. You need to be ready. Woojin then turned to Mayo. It seemed like he was trying to do everything alone. Even when he knew he had his limits. He even had lost to Susanoo before. Yeah, I'm sorry. You're right. Woojin turned to Mayo. She now had 7 tails and a ring. She was good enough as a fighter. Good. Let's get ready then. They took all the gear they could get at the moment and Woojin talked to Ryota. Keep me updated on the location. Don't worry. Woojin got up and found the helicopter waiting on the roof. When he and Mayo got up, the pilot smiled and said, Dom called me. You just want to get to the yacht? Yeah, we have to follow them even if we have to cross the border. It's okay. Dom will take care of it. Woojin explained to Mayo on the way, we are up against Rileka, a demon. She uses arrows but they will be hard to avoid. We also have to deal with 2 werewolves and 25 vampires. That's a lot. We should sneak in and get them one by one. Woojin then checked his weapons and bit his lips. He had been too relaxed after knowing Amwon couldn't read him. Amwon already had read his past and if he did, he would have read the memory of Woojin becoming an avatar. That would obviously lead to Dr. Ann. Amwon. It led to Amwon in the end. There were a lot of vampires that attacked, so if he read their memories to find Dimitri, that would lead him to Amwon also. They saw the yacht at the distance and Woojin stopped the pilot. We'll go on by ourselves from here. It's too far to swim there. It's okay. Woojin then grabbed Mayo's hand and jumped out. He stepped in the air and flew over to the yacht. He saw a vampire standing guard at the back of the yacht. Woojin dropped on him and swung his sword. The vampire couldn't even scream and turned into ashes. Woojin said, we have to do this in silence if we want to rescue Dr. Ann. I know. Don't worry. Mayo, who also trained in the Hunter's Way, closely followed Woojin with the gun on her shoulder. Chapter 96, Rescue. 3. Brunhilde was drenched in sweat as she laid down on the bed. Dr. Ann sat down next to her while grabbing her hand and glared at Rileka with her bow on her lap sitting across from them. I told you I will do as you said. Why aren't you healing her? I can make my power stop. but I can't heal her. Avatars can regenerate. She won't die, but she's in pain." Releka looked annoyingly at Dr. N. "Doctor, we know you have great power, but we also have the power to suck that power out of you. We are letting her live just to let you work for us willingly." Releka knew about Brunhilde. She also knew that if Brunhilde was well armed, she wouldn't have been caught so easily. So Releka did stop her rotting power, but it was stuck inside Brunhilde to continue eating away if anything went wrong. That's why Brunhilde couldn't regenerate. Dr. Ann bit his lips when someone knocked on the door. "What?" Johan came into the room. "I lost contact with ones waiting inside the yacht." "Oh?" Releka then checked the time. "He must be here then." "Who?" "Ko Woojin." Dr. Ann became surprised and looked up. Releka scoffed. "Don't get your hopes up. He's come to die." She knew many demons had been killed by Ko Woojin, but they had the upper hand here. Releka was also more powerful than most demons, and she was even more powerful when there were others who could distract her targets. Johan called up the vampires, but there were only 10. Rai came into the room also. "I think my kids that were chasing after the Dak Bazaar are dead too." Releka turned to Rai and he said while touching his chest, "I lost the connection." Releka ordered, "Protect this room." Ko Woojin must have killed them. Rai frowned. His blue werewolf clan moved only because they were paid handsomely. The job itself wasn't so hard. Bahung was out of the country and they only needed to fight Bum and Yoong. They also had over 30 vampires and Releka by their side. They never thought they would fail, even without mentioning Bum and Yoong, who's stronger than expected. Brunhilde was much stronger, but still, they did the job. Rai sent his brothers to settle the job cleanly, but they all died. The man had come this far. Rai stood with Releka. He also had his brother Roi stand beside him. If they were going to fight, they had to take the lead. Vampires also got ready in the back and Releka readied on her arrows. Anyone who opened the door was going to die. After killing vampires outside the yacht, Woojin realized they all retreated back into a single room. He couldn't relax yet as Releka's arrows were more dangerous when she had someone to block for her. Woojin looked at Mayo and she took out a grenade. Woojin nodded and Mayo threw it down the corridor. The door exploded and 2 arrows were fired from inside. Woojin swung his sword at the arrows and said, "Releka has 20 arrows." "Really? Anyway, here's another grenade." Mayo then threw the grenade again. The grenade that was thrown in the air turned itself and exploded inside the room. This explosion was easy to block if werewolves were standing guard. However, the continued ranged attacks would make them run out of patience. Mayo aimed her gun at the door and Woojin swung his sword at the arrow that suddenly came out of the wall. He then saw werewolves rushing at him through the walls. Woojin swung his sword at the claw and sliced it, but the enemy still charged at him. Then another attack came from behind at the same time as if it had all been planned. Woojin then dashed and swung his sword with his spiritual power. The werewolf was cut in half, but the attacks by the vampires from the left and right shot past his body. The cloak, however, blocked the attack. The vampire's attack did cut the cloak, but it was blocked by his muscles. Woojin trusted Mayo, who was behind him. She fired the gun and a silver bullet struck the enemy's head. Woojin followed up by swinging his sword. He had to block 3 more arrows. Mayo then dodged the enemy from the right and struck Starfish Fang on the enemy's chin. It was a 4th-generation vampire, but they were easily killed. Woojin then jumped. ROI. At that moment, one of the werewolf leaped forward and swiped his claws. Woojin brought up his sword to counter it, but the enemy threw his fist at him. Woojin twisted. He was quicker than the enemy, but the enemy's feral instincts were beyond Woojin's expectations. The enemy was now trying to bite off Woojin's neck. Woojin pulled his head back and threw it against the enemy's head. Rai's head turned and Woojin rammed it into his shoulder. He tried to cut him down with his sword, but the arrow was fired again. This time, the arrow was so powerful that it made the sword fly back and another enemy charged in. It was Yoan, the 2nd-generation vampire. Woojin quickly picked up the sword and moved. Woojin was surprised. Yoan had much more spiritual power than Woojin expected. He had cut the claws of a werewolf, but Yoan's claws were fine. Yoan unleashed more attacks and Rai also joined. Another arrow flew over to them, but with Mayo taking care of the other vampires, Wu Jin was able to hold 3 of them at bay, while Wu Jin defended himself against Yuan's powerful spiritual power, Rai's feral attacks, and Rileka's powerful arrows. He learned that he was getting used to their attack pattern. He then felt his senses increasing. He also felt Tsukimi's spiritual stone melting away very slightly. It was very little, but it made it so that Wu Jin's spiritual power did not go dry. If it wasn't for the spiritual stone, Wu Jin was going to take out the mirror. Yet he didn't need to, since Tsukimi's power was coming to life. Blocking the arrows was only possible as his senses were heightened. As the fight went on, the enemies realized that it wasn't going well for them. Rai discovered this and attacked harder, ready to give his flesh up for the kill. Wu Jin reacted more fiercely. He deflected Rai's claws and had him bite his arm. It felt like his wrist would be crushed, but Wu Jin pulled the arm and used Rai's body to block Yuan's attack. Yuan quickly pulled his attack back and Wu Jin stabbed his sword into Rai's body. That's when an unexpected attack came from behind. An arrow penetrated Rai's body, and when Wu Jin realized it, the arrow was already protruding in front of his chest. Wu Jin then thought a way to defend himself. Guybulg suddenly came out of his chest to defend against the arrows. Wu Jin then ripped Rai's body apart and swung his sword at Yuan. He swung the sword to make it seem like he was making a room for an attack. Yuan lunged in with his hand aimed at Wu Jin's body. As the claw scratched Wu Jin, his muscles tightened and he grabbed the hand. Yuan spread his claws to cut out the flesh, but he couldn't get away from Wu Jin. His wrist was crushed and Yuan gritted his teeth, but his wrist was then cut off. Wu Jin then threw his fist at Yuan's face. One fist, and his head exploded while 2 arrows came whizzing by. Wu Jin barely was able to swing his sword to deflect them, and Rileka spoke with a sigh. Gosh, I didn't think it would be this bad. Rileka looked at Wu Jin and Mayo. She only had 5 arrows and all the others had been killed. Useless junk. Wu Jin charged as he didn't intend on talking with her, and Rileka fired her arrows. Wu Jin deflected them, but they were so powerful that it made him stop running. Who are you going to save? Rileka snapped her fingers and the power stuck in Brunhilde's stomach began to expand. UGH. Brunhilde gasped. Rileka grabbed her and threw her at Wu Jin while she grabbed Dr. An and jumped out through the wall. Wu Jin took out the mirror and flashed the light at Brunhilde's stomach. After Rileka's power dissipated, Wu Jin jumped out. Rileka was already riding on the head of a giant sea monster called the Sea Serpent and was getting away. Wu Jin quickly tried to follow Rileka, but she fired another arrow. It seemed like she was only focused on keeping Wu Jin at bay. He was thrown to the back and the Sea Serpent was already far off into the distance. Wu Jin jumped again, but he had to block the arrow and thus he fell into the sea. Dr. An shouted, "Look after Brunhilde." Wu Jin clenched his fist as he saw Sea Serpent diving into the sea. He couldn't save Dr. An. Chapter 97, Rescue. 4. Wu Jin returned to the yacht and Brunhilde looked at him with a pale face. "Where's Dr. An?" "He's been taken." Brunhilde then looked at Mayo healing her wound by the light in her hand and said, "I'm okay. Please save Dr. An." Wu Jin wasn't going to give up. The satellite phone was broken when he fell into the sea. He went for the captain's room. It was the first place Wu Jin and Mayo took control of when they got on the yacht. Wu Jin found a satellite phone and called Sun Wukong's number. "Mr. Sunday, it's Wu Jin. Why, did you find a new recipe? I called to ask for your help." "Help? What help?" "My friend has been kidnapped by a demon. She's on the way toward Qingdao, but I can't track her. I need your help." Sun Wukong became silent and Wu Jin felt his mouth becoming dry. The Sea Serpent was too fast and he needed at least a speedboat to chase it across the sea. "I'll call you back." The phone disconnected and Wu Jin felt nervous. He needed Sun Wukong's help as they were already in Chinese waters. The phone rang and Wu Jin picked it up. "I told Wu Guang to track down any sea serpents moving in that area. I'll send Ma Yang down to Qingdao. Track them together. He's already nearby." Bye. I'll send my coordinates. Number. Ma Yang will find you. Track them once you meet up with him. Thank you. I've paid my debt. Of course, Sun Wukong was saved because of what Wu Jin told Bahung about the Day of Chaos and thus agreed to help him. Wu Jin then went down to see Mayo and Brunhilde. He explained what he talked about with Sun Wukong, and Brunhilde sighed in relief. Please save him. I'll do my best, and with the Dragon King Wu Guang looking for it, we'll find them soon enough. Mayo also sighed as Brunhilde recovered a bit. She was even ready to use her orb in case if Brunhilde didn't recover. Brunhilde had gotten much better, but she couldn't get up yet. She asked Wu Jin again. Please, don't worry. Wu Jin then turned to Mayo. Stay here, we have to be careful. That's when Wu Jin found a giant eye appearing at the window. He checked and went up to the deck. There was a head protruding from the sea next to the yacht. Are you Ko Wu Jin? Prince Ma Yang, do you know me? I heard from Mr. Sunday. The large mouth turned into a smile. All families of the sea are looking for the sea serpent. We'll go together, thank you. Wu Jin climbed up on him and Prince Ma Yang lowered his head. The head was bigger than Wu Jin himself, and considering the body inside the sea, it looked like a several-meter-long dragon with blue scales. Wu Jin grabbed the horns that looked like deer horns and the dragon turned. We've got him, but we can't go near. I'll tell them to stay at bay and we'll go after them. I'm ready. Hold on tight. Prince Ma Yang began to move smoothly and began drifting along the water at an amazing speed. The sea serpent was fast, but Prince Ma Yang was much faster. As Wu Jin ran across, he realized how powerful Mr. Sun was again. He asked for the Dragon King's help, and now his son Ma Yang was able to help just after one phone call. Are those who are tracking down Rileka all avatars? Number. They are spiritual beings that live in the sea. I see. We're close. Wu Jin then looked out. It was a dark night and the stars reflected across the sea. On the calm sea with no waves, Wu Jin saw one moving in front. It wasn't as fast, however. Maybe they will catch up to them in 5 minutes. That's when Prince Ma Yang smiled and asked, shall we go then? Wu Jin gripped the horns after the sudden acceleration. He began to close the gap at an enormous speed. Wu Jin saw that Dr. An was unconscious while soaked with water. Rileka frowned and pulled her bow when she found Wu Jin. I wondered where these insects came from. It was you. I got help. Let's finish this. No thanks. Rileka let go of her bow and the arrow was fired. Before Wu Jin could strike it down with his sword, the arrow turned. Ma Yang moved to deflect it with his horn. The sea serpent then opened its mouth and charged at Ma Yang. Wu Jin took out the mirror of heavens and the light was unleashed upon them. Rileka quickly hid behind sea serpent, but the light was critical against sea serpent too, making it writhe. Ma Yang charged in and bit the neck while Wu Jin jumped over to Sea Serpent and swung his sword. Rileka dodged him and fired her arrow from close range. Wu Jin tried to strike it down, but the arrow exploded. It was too close that Wu Jin couldn't react to it. He frowned but concentrated the spiritual power on his mirror. He felt the particles of the arrowhead rotting away as it was stuck on his body, but he was able to flash the light onto Rileka's chest. Ugh! Rileka flinched and Wu Jin swung his sword. He cut Rileka's thighs while she swung her bow and Wu Jin lunged forward. Rileka then focused on her power to rot Wu Jin's skin, but Wu Jin reached out to her. From his hand, Guybulg shot out and pierced her chest. Ugh! Her chest was then skewed by the hundreds of roots that branched out from the blade. It was a severe wound, but Wu Jin wasn't in good shape either. When Rileka was trying to pull out last remaining arrow, Wu Jin took out the bamboo spear and finished her. When she shivered and died, Wu Jin recalled the spears and took the mirror to put in his spiritual power. He then flashed it over his wounds. It gave him terrible pain. While Wu Jin was dealing with his wounds, the cloak of vampire bat wrapped itself around Rileka. It sucked her fiercely and spat the spiritual stone out. Wu Jin picked it up and looked around. Dr. An, who was thrown by the writhing sea serpent, was in Ma Yang's mouth before he was placed over a large 5-colored turtle. Ma Yang looked at Wu Jin with the blood of the sea serpent all over his face. Wu Jin hopped over to the turtle and checked on Dr. An. He had been knocked out. Wu Jin shook him and Dr. An opened his eyes. He then found Wu Jin and grabbed his shoulders. Brunhilde, is she okay? She'll be okay. How about you? I'm fine. That's good. Dr. An then got up and saw Prince Ma Yang looking at them. He was surprised. Dragon? It's Prince Ma Yang, but not a dragon. Prince Ma Yang smiled with blood still all over his mouth. It is my power. I can turn into a dragon. He then turned smaller and adopted the figure of a man. A tall man stood above the water and wiped his mouth before turning toward Wu Jin and Dr. An. We'll go back now. Dr. An got up. He thought he knew a lot about the other world, but it seemed like there was still more that he did not know. When Prince Ma Yang got up on the turtle began to swim. Wu Jin was surprised at the speed of the turtle's swimming through. It was faster than most speedboats. Wu Jin turned to Dr. An. He didn't think the doctor would be in danger while he was gone. Amon seemed to have more power than he thought possible. He needed to make Amon not read his trace or else many would be in danger because of him. Wu Jin also thought he should get a divine object for Brunhilde too. If she was armed, they would not have been kidnapped so easily. The sun was coming up when they got to the yacht. Mayo helped Brunhilde stand outside on the deck. Dr. An waved at Brunhilde in joy and Brunhilde smiled. Dr. An turned to Wu Jin. Send me up there. Wu Jin grabbed his waist and threw him. He flew over the sea and Mayo helped him land. The first thing he did was hug Brunhilde. I was so worried about you. I'm okay. Prince Ma Yang smiled as he saw them over at the yacht. I think I did enough for what Mr. Sun asked me to do. Wu Jin bowed to him. Thank you for your help. Wu Jin then jumped to the yacht and Prince Ma Yang waved at him before he disappeared into the sea with the turtle. Chapter 98, The Team. 1. They returned safely to Korea. Byung and Smith were back earlier than planned after they heard what had happened. They gathered at the VIP hospital room. Mayo did some basic healing but Brunhilde needed intensive care since her injury was critical. It made her organs rot so it took a bit of time to recover. She couldn't even eat in her current state. Byung spoke while everyone gathered near the hospital sofa. How is it? Byung showed off his new leg. I can use it like my own and I can even change its shape. So I've been practicing doing that. The cloak of Vampire Bat was a divine object so it was still useful in its divided state. Dom continued. Although this keeps sucking my blood so it makes me dizzy. It sucks blood? Wu Jin explained. It loves blood with spiritual power. You need to feed blood to it regularly. I see. Byung then turned to Young. She was doing push-ups with her new arm. Byung read her determination to use the new arm like her own and sighed. Thanks. It was almost too late. They had lost their arm and leg but the effect was already spreading into their body when Wu Jin found them. Byung asked Wu Jin, did you get information about Amon? Wu Jin shook his head. Number. I had to kill all the vampires. I got the memories of the werewolves but they were close to useless. I see. But we have the phone number. We'll have Ryota track him down. He was on the way back to Korea to meet with Ryota when this happened. Bum lost a leg and Young lost an arm. Brunhilde was almost killed. Yet they all survived and they rescued Dr. An. Wu Jin looked at all of them who had gathered here. Starting from Byung, who was the most powerful one besides Wu Jin in this room. He had Mayo who could read memories and fight well, world-class hacker Ryota, Dr. An who was an avatar, Brunhilde who protected the doctor, and Smith who will develop weapons for them. He now had the basic team members he wanted. He needed to meet up with few more, but he currently didn't have what he needed to persuade them, and they wouldn't think of it as a problem right now so it wasn't time yet. Amon needed to be more dangerous if Wu Jin were to persuade them. He was planning to kill Amon before needing to persuade them, even if it was that hard. Wu Jin turned to the people and solemnly said, I need to speak to you all. He thought he could do everything alone after becoming an avatar, but he realized it after almost losing Dr. An. He couldn't do it alone. Some of you might have heard about this, but there are some who haven't heard of it yet so let me explain it again. Everyone turned to him. Wu Jin started. I saw the future. Avatars believed in looking into the future but they didn't believe in time travel. That's why Wu Jin decided to explain it this way. Amon, one of 72 demons who has the eyes to look into the future succeeds and summons the otherworldly god. Humankind is wiped out because of that god. Smith became shocked as they were hearing it for the first time. He turned around and became more shocked when most of them seemed to have heard it already. Is it possible to look into the future? Byung explained. There are some who can read the sky, but I've never seen ones that can clearly read the future like Woojin. I think it's the power he got after becoming an avatar. He became an avatar? Smith was intrigued and Woojin answered, I saw the potential of becoming an avatar while looking into the future. I explained it to Dr. An and it helped his project to make me become an avatar. Can a human become an avatar? Woojin continued. I don't have the power, but I became an avatar. I don't recommend you trying it out though. Why? Avatars live longer. Becoming an avatar was a surprise in itself, but that wasn't the issue right now. You can hear more about it from Dr. An later. Let's continue. So, after looking into the future, I believed I must become an avatar and put a stop to Amwon's plan. I think I was successful in doing so, and thus far he started the day of chaos without completing all the preparations. Smith asked, did it happen in the future you saw? Yes, but it has occurred much earlier, and I never saw the blacksmith industry getting attacked. It means the future is changing. Everyone became silent. I now see happenings that I didn't see in the future, and Amwon is watching me and reading my past. Woojin turned to Dr. An. That's why Dr. An became the target this time. Dr. An shook his head. I wasn't protected with such measures even when I studied alone in the past. We should just say the enemy tried their best this time. Woojin shook his head. Amwon even came for Smith. You both were going to be hindrances to his plan. Smith pointed at himself. I am a threat? Of course, that's why he even risked his monster farms being revealed to attack you. Smith then sighed. He felt relieved as he looked at Dr. An. When he first joined the team, he thought he'd be the lead scientist on the team, but after realizing that Dr. An was with them, it made him feel envious and jealous, as the scientist who became an avatar was going to be more important. However, it seemed like he was also important, as Woojin had explained. Woojin looked at Bahyung. Bahyung, we need the mirror that the black merchants use. You want our histories to be untraceable? Yeah, it will be hard to get one, but I'll try my best. Woojin then turned to all the others. Once we get our hands on the mirror, I'll give an explanation about the weapon I saw in the future. We'll create the new weapon and stop their plans. People nodded in silent agreement. I thought knowing it alone was enough to fight Amon, but I realized I can't do this alone. Please, help me. Dr. An spoke up first. I'll do my best to help. Brunhilde almost died. I cannot forgive them for it. He grabbed on Brunhilde's hand. Woojin smiled. Bahyung also said, they attacked my brother and sister. I'll burn them alive. Bum added, yeah, I'll make them pay for my leg. This was the start of the team. Woojin said, we need to find the mirror first. Good. We'll talk about the future after we get that. They needed to share the details of what happened in Woojin's future. I'll try to remember everything I saw. Get some rest while we look for the mirror. Okay. Woojin then turned to Smith. We bought out a defense contractor company in Korea. Can I have you be in charge of setting up a process so that we can create a bullet using bacony shells in bulk? Of course. Amwon stopped writing and placed down his pen as someone came up to him from behind. He turned his chair around and smiled. You're here. There was a man standing next to Dimitri. He was dark-skinned and his eyes shined in the lighting. I'm sorry about Ogun. Where is this man who killed my brother? We will avenge your brother after we proceed with the plan. You'll get enough chances for it. What plan? Amwon continued. It would have been great if Rayleika succeeded, but it doesn't matter. We have others we can use. Shango frowned and Amwon said, I heard of a certain project called the Avatar Project. Avatar Project. You can create avatars artificially. Shango scoffed. You think it is possible? 2 avatars have already been created from it. Shango frowned and Amwon continued with a smile. I need people to join the trials. People who can become our soldiers. What are the chances of success? Is it important? Even if the chance is 1 out of 10,000, we can still create tens to hundreds of avatars on our side. The liquid was created for Woojin and Dr. N, but they would be able to have at least a few successes while testing out. It will result in the death of many people, but Amon did not care. He only cared about results. This is better than the monster farms. Amon laughed. Chapter 99, The Team. 2. Smith worked quickly to set up the factory that was going to make the bullets in bulk. Old Huang also brought in merman blood. It was an amount that would require thousands of mermen to be killed to collect it. It was astonishing that Old Huang managed to get it. The blood filled the pool and the bacony shells reinforced it. What they needed was now the sand of Sandman. This was acquired by Smith from the Hunters Guild. On the day when the first set of bullets was created, the team gathered to check their power. Mayo reloaded the rifle and aimed it against the hard leather of monsters famous for their durability. These were the most durable in terms of physical resilience if excluding avatars. It was hard to get them, let alone come across them. We'll start then. Mayo pulled the trigger. With a gunshot, the leather was penetrated through easily. It was Yeti leather, which was known for its strength. Mayo then fired at a ghost turtle shell. It was so hard that the bullet was stuck, but it didn't penetrate through. Wu Jin asked, "Can you shoot the same spot until it goes through?" "Yeah." Mayo fired again. It wasn't easy to fire on the same spot, but Mayo was an avatar and she easily fired the same spot 3 times, making a hole in the shell. Wu Jin nodded. Ghost turtle shells were not usually attached since it was easier to attack its stomach instead. Yet, this bullet even made a hole in the hard shell. This is good enough. We can move on to the next goal. Next goal? Wu Jin smiled. We'll create it in bulk and collect the finest hunters in return for providing these bullets. I'll arrange that, Smith answered. Wu Jin then turned to Baheng. Did you get it? Yeah. But I used a lot of money, and I have to do their bidding later. Baheng took out the mirror, or the mirror of farsight. This would now allow them to hide from Amwan's eyes. Baheng said, "So, let's hear why you need such a thing." Wu Jin looked toward the avatars. Honestly, avatars did not like the idea of hunters having weapons that would give them the ability to hurt avatars. But he needed this. If it wasn't for the weapon he was trying to make, Wu Jin might not have met with Amwan in the end. We'll hunt down basilisks by using these bullets. Basilisk? Yeah, if we use their eyes, we can use these bullets to freeze spiritual power. What? Avatars were all about spiritual power. It was important for them to use their powers and strength. If the spiritual power was frozen, they were nothing. Wu Jin added, "This can be dangerous for us too, so we have to keep it under control. Even if we make this weapon, we have to keep it to ourselves. Only we can use the weapon. We can't let the weapon fall into the hands of our enemies." Baheng nodded. Wu Jin then turned to Smith. "Hunters can hunt basilisks if they know how. They should provide their own supplies." Wu Jin spoke to the others. "Are we done with the mobile lab?" "We decided to fix the private jet that Smith had. We'll use that for now before we get a new one." "Okay, let's use that." Ryota turned. "I'll talk with Amwan over the phone. Track the number and find his location." "How long do you need?" "I need at least 30 seconds to get the exact location." "Good." Wu Jin then shifted his focus back to Baheng. "Can you get a starfish fang?" "Starfish fang? They're rare, but I can get one if I pay a bit more." "Can you get one for everyone on the team?" "For what?" Wu Jin pulled out his starfish fang. It was black, unlike regular starfish fangs. "This one is what I've been working with until now. It does look different." Wu Jin then threw it and it was stuck in the ghost turtle shell. Baheng was astonished. "It's pretty strong. Take it out yourself." Baheng then got up and took it out. He was shocked looked by the fang. "What happened?" "If you feed it spiritual stones, you can gain its power little by little." Wu Jin's starfish fang had a lot. It now even had resistance against fire. It was almost a divine object on its own. "Mine has eaten a lot of spiritual stones until now. However, the spiritual stones of monsters can do the job just fine. You just need to feed it a lot." "Meaning I just need to spend the money?" "Yeah." Baheng grinned and turned to Bum. "Bum, let's spend some money." "Of course, and there's a downside. It's still weak against fire." "Yeah, that's fine. If carrying it is enough, I'll make a fire-resistant scabbard." "It's expensive, but the 1,000-year firefish scales will do." "Yeah, mine's okay. But you should make the scabbard for the others." "Okay, I'll buy every starfish fang out in the world just in case." "Yeah, and purchase spiritual stones while you're at it." "Good. If we can become powerful, money is not an issue." Wu Jin then got the starfish fang back and finalized the plan. "Let's call Amwan and track him once the mobile lab is ready." Baheng answered. If we find his location, we can have the representative of that place to attack first before we go there." Wu Jin smiled bitterly. "If Amwon is there, the representative must have been killed already." "Yeah, I guess so." Behyung sighed. "Let's get on it then." "What are you going to do?" "I'll need to train." Wu Jin now had a lot of spiritual power thanks to Tsukuimi's stone. He needed to train to make it his own. "I will join you," Brunhilde said, and Yoang also decided to join. "I need training so I can control this as my own." "Let's do it together." Yoang flexed the new arm. Wu Jin warned them, "I won't go easy on you." Of course, unlike his intention, Behyung only brought back one starfish fang. He sighed at the people's confused looks. "Someone got everything already. I got this from an avatar who had it in his collection as a hobby. I had to give him my collection in exchange." "What did you pay for it?" "I had to give him my car." Behyung then spun the starfish fang in his hand. "So, I can feed anything to it?" "Yeah, you can feed stones that you seem to lack the most. I guess you need agility in your case." "Yeah." That's when Dr. An asked, "Can I have that?" Everyone turned and Dr. An spoke confidently. "I want to study it. This is the only one I got. That's why I need to see if we can reproduce it in large quantities." Behyung turned to Wu Jin and he turned to him too. "It's not going to disappear unless we set on fire. Let him study it for a while. If he can create more, that's even better." Behyung then gave it to Dr. An. He also gave the doctor some of the stones he purchased. Dr. An fed it and became surprised. As he focused on the fang, Wu Jin turned back to Behyung. "So, the fangs on the market disappeared, you said?" "Yeah." "Can we track who or where they were sold to?" "Why? I think Amon might have read it in my past." Behyung frowned. "You think he bought them?" "Yeah, I think that's what happened." "Good. Let's track it down. Mark the countries without representatives, and with a phone call, we'll find him." Behyung grinned. "I'm looking forward to it." Chapter 100, Phone Call. 1. There were various divine objects. Some were legendary while some allowed avatars to gain power equal to their own, but those divine objects were rare and some divine objects were not so great. Those that only required spiritual power were easy to get as it was unpopular among avatars. Brunhilde and Yoang were equipped with those weapons as they stood in front of Wu Jin. Brunhilde held a shield and a sword while Yoang had an Ana club with spikes all over it. Wu Jin had his Kusanagi no Ken. His fighting skill increased tremendously while training against Brunhilde and Yoang. He also trained using his spears. He was unmatched while using his modern weapons and hunter skills, but Brunhilde was the expert on using weapons like these. Wu Jin learned a lot from her. He knew that his strength and agility outpowered both of theirs, so they were training with a 2-on-1 battle. Wu Jin always fought in his best condition as he had to be experienced in fighting strong avatars. While training, Tsukuimi's spiritual stone melted away little by little. He had to be almost on verge of death when for the stone to melt, so Wu Jin had to go all out in draining. Therefore, he always received many injuries, but he recovered fast. Wu Jin swung his sword at the Ana club while Brunhilde's shield struck Wu Jin. He was thrown back and he slumped down. "Ugh, do you want more?" "We'll stop here." Wu Jin breathed heavily as he spoke. 6 of his ribs were broken right now. He focused on his regeneration to recover and Mio came over. She placed her hand over Wu Jin and the wound healed faster. "Can you keep healing like this?" "I've gotten used to using the ring. I can heal without using my orb now." "That's amazing." "Yeah, I didn't imagine I would get something like this from her." Wu Jin looked at her and she smiled. "It's my mom's ring. I didn't realize she'd actually give it to me before I earned my 9 tails." Mio smiled bitterly. She first started out by sucking energy from men. However, when she accidentally sucked up a boy's energy who cared for her when she got hurt and made him become infertile, she decided to stop doing that to focus on using nature's energy only. This made her distant from her family. Her mother kept telling her to move on and get back to absorbing energy from men, so she had to move out. She never called or visited home after that, but her mother suddenly appeared and gave her the ring. Woojin grabbed her hand and got up. Mayo's help recovered him fast. Do you want to train together, number? I want to focus working on my orb. She was faster than most vampires, but she worked hard on her orb. Woojin smiled and turned to Brunhilde and Yoang. Yoang was shaping her left arm like a blade and was practicing swings with it. She turned to Woojin and smiled. Shall we continue? Yeah. Advanced equipment was put on the jet and Smith asked Dr. Anne, who was standing beside him. Let me know if you need anything else. I'll get you anything. Thanks. After becoming teammates, Smith realized that Dr. Anne was a few years older than him. Smith also respected Dr. Anne for his findings and they were getting along just fine. Can I become an avatar too? Smith asked, and Dr. Anne realized why Smith was so friendly. If we have enough ingredients, yes, but I don't want to recommend it. Why is that? We need the blood of spiritual beings, which is hard to get. It will take a long time to check which blood might be a match for you, and even if it all works out, you need to take the medicine in. Dr. Anne became pale. Just remembering the moment gave him chills. I died that day. What? Dr. Anne felt like it was better to show him than just explaining. He showed him the video where he's screaming in pain and then fainting. His veins popped and changed even when he was knocked out, and Smith flinched. Every bone and vein in your body will be ripped and recreated. If you ask me if I would do it again, I might refuse. Dr. Anne said that, but he knew he would do it again for Brunhilde. Smith then looked at the screen and asked, if I still want to try it, can you help me? Dr. Anne tapped on his shoulder. Of course, but you won't be able to get the ingredients. What do we need? We need the dragon blood that is free of curses. We can get the blood of avatars in our fights ahead, but it won't be easy to get the uncursed dragon blood. Uncursed dragon blood? That was impossible to get unless Dragon gave it out willingly. We'll see. If we get our hands on it again, I'll help you for sure. Dr. Anne then moved to check on his lab and Smith turned off the video. He was interested, but he wasn't sure if he could handle such pain. However, the scientist in him made him wonder how he could get his hands on the dragon blood. While getting ready, a batch of basilisk bodies arrived. Woojin took the starfish fang and began opening up the basilisks. There were a few things that were useful from the body, but what he needed most were the eyes. Woojin took the eyes out. They were bigger than human fists individually, and Woojin turned to Dr. Anne. We need to coat the bullet with this. It doesn't look hard. Woojin nodded and cut open the eyeball. He then collected the liquid dripping from it into a bottle and then placed the bullet into the bottle before taking it out. Soon, the bacony shell was coated by the basilisk liquid. Woojin loaded into his gun and asked, Behyung, you want to try getting shot at? You're an avatar too. How about you try it on yourself first? Woojin smiled. My skin is too hard even without spiritual power. You sound like a douche, and it's better for you, a representative of Korea, to try it out on yourself to feel how powerful this weapon is. You can use your own experience. Behyung hesitated and asked, can I defend against it? Just don't burn it. A lot of bullets are required to overcome spiritual power. Then do you want me to just take it? You can't call that defending. I won't aim for vital parts. You can just let it heal fast. That doesn't sound reassuring at all when you're trying to fire a gun at me. Woojin aimed at Behyung and Bum asked, can I try firing it? It doesn't matter who does it. You just have to be careful not to aim the heart or the head. Bum nodded and received the gun from Woojin. Behyung spoke up while watching Bum hold the gun. Hey, brother, you know I love you, right? Yeah, of course. I'm so busy these days it makes me shudder in anger, but I know you love me. I think there's a hint of anger in your voice. Get ready. Bum then aimed at Behyung's arm. Behyung wielded his spiritual power into his arm and Bum grinned. That much of power usually deflected bullets. Bum thought this was what going to happen again and pulled the trigger. Ugh! The bullet lodged itself into Behyung's arm. As the bullet got into contact with the spiritual power, it froze the power like pudding and penetrated the skin. Behyung screamed, that f***ing hurts. Of course, you were shot by a gun, but do you see how powerful it is now? Yeah, I guess. If we make those bullets for a sniper rifle, we can shoot down enemies from the distance. Woojin then gave the starfish fang to Behyung. So, Make sure you wear armor now. Behyung got the starfish fang from Woojin and felt his armor covering. He laughed. This thing surprises me every time. Myo then placed her hand over Behyung's wound and the bullet was pulled out as it recovered. Behyung then threw the fang back to Woojin. Are we done with preparations? Woojin nodded. We just need to coat all of our bullets. Woojin then turned to Ryota. Are you done with all this support? I was able to make it so that I can track him in 20 seconds, then get ready. The coating itself won't take too long. Woojin quickly worked on the basilisk bodies to take out the eyeballs and they were able to coat 200 bullets. 20 of them were for the sniper rifle. When it was all ready, all of them got into the jet. They were now ready to make the call. After a few rings, the call went through. Who is this? Woojin clenched his fist as he heard the voice. I am Ko Woojin,